I'd like to welcome you to the February 22nd, 2024 Baltimore City Planning Commission meeting. My name is Sean Davis. I have the opportunity and privilege of chairing the commission. Seated to my right is Chris Ryer, the Director of Planning and Secretary of the Commission. Mr. Secretary, will you call roll?
Robin Allen.
Present.
Marcia Collins.
Present.
The Honorable Eric Costello.
Present.
Talib Horn.
Present.
Claudia Jolin.
Present.
Doug McCoach.
Present.
Justin Williams. Eric Stevenson.
Present.
And Sean Davis.
We have before us our meeting minutes from our February 8th, 2024 meeting. Are there any questions or comments regarding those? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner. And all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And I will abstain as I was not here. Moving on to our consent agenda item, we only have one item. It's CIP transfer, some Board of Estimates hearing from last night, the 21st. There were 9 items on that CIP transfer. Any questions or comments regarding those? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Collins, second.
Second.
Thank you, Vice Chair Stevenson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Moving on to our regular agenda items. First agenda item number 4.
First item on the regular agenda is a minor change in revised final development plans for PUD number 109 at 3301 Boston Street, the First Councilmatic District. Ren Southern will present.
Thank you. As noted, this is a minor change in revised final development plans for planned unit development number 109. I'm Renata Southard. The petitioner is Lou Catelli on behalf of the owner. The owner is 3301 Boston Street, LLC. This is within the Outer Southeast Planning District, and Matthew DeSantis is the community planner. This is the site location, the Canton Crossing. Let me see if I can get there. This is Canton Crossing development, and then this is the harbor. This is Canton Waterfront Park. The building is outlined in red, and it's hard to tell from the image, but this giant shaded area is a parking lot. This is a view of the property from Boston Street, and then a view from Clinton Street as you're moving south. This is the approved development plan. It's really hard to read this, but the table here has called out a use of retail and office, and then they have their urban development principles listed in this PUD drawing. I'm sorry we don't have a better copy, but this is the one that we had on file. The building is here, located at C. So this is the proposed building plan. Very minor change to this property. There's an existing canopy that's going to be removed and then replaced with a walkable terrace and a new canopy at the second floor. So the only change to this is what's outlined in red here. This is the second floor. These are the building elevations and the renderings to help you understand what's going on. So I'm going to back up just so that it's very clear what's happening here. This canopy here is being removed and replaced for a newer, updated, more occupiable space. Other than that, landscape improvements, tenant signage will come when they have tenants. But that's about it. It's very straightforward, I think. These are the renders. Again, an occupiable kind of deck area that looks out across the neighboring parking lot over to the harbor. These are the urban development principles to extend, enhance, and activate the harbor walk, create pedestrian access and view corridors into the harbor. I think this project definitely adheres to all of the urban development principles. And then, let's see. For final design approval, the underlying zoning of C3 permits the proposed changes to the awning and to the access stairs. Per the underlying zoning, there's some limitations to the signage, but 2 square feet of linear building frontage above the ground floor is allowed. As I said, their tenants aren't secured yet, so we'll see that later. This complies with the PUD. The proposed changes meet the requirements of the PUD's Exhibit 4 Urban Development Principles, as was seen on a previous slide, and the project has completed design review. All neighbors were notified. Notice was given to the Canton Community Association and Brewers Hill Neighbors Community Association. You should have letters of support from the Canton Community Association on the Wix site, as well as a support letter from the neighbor, building to the south. The site was posted as required, and planning recommends approval.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Ren? Starting off with you, Commissioner Horn.
No questions.
Commissioner Collins.
I can certainly see a difference between the renderings and the existing. If things progress as shown, it will certainly enlighten the area right at that location. Right now, it just seems to fade into the background. So, very interesting. Thank you.
Let's see. Deputy Mayor Williams.
No comment. No question.
Vice Chair Stevenson.
No questions.
Commissioner Jolin.
No questions.
Commissioner Allen. All right, record time. Commissioner well, okay. Commissioner McCoach. just blew it.
Yeah, not this one. Just a quick question about, it appears to me that the purpose of this project is to create to enhance the value of the second floor tenant spaces, either by creating a sun deck, outdoor amenity space, or tenant front doors in the second floor, right? I mean, that's what's going on here. And there's nothing wrong with that. It looks great. I just wanted to get to the underlying motive of the applicant.
I can't speak to that directly, but the applicant is here.
Actually, if you can, hold on one second. We'll get to you. I just want to make sure that we have an opportunity to speak with Ren first, but let's hold that question. That's your only question? Okay. Councilman Costello, any questions for Ren? No, sir. And I have no questions for you. Thank you very much. Now, if you would, come up. We just got to go through some orderly process. Come on up, tell us your name.
Thank you. I'm Nick Over. Appreciate your time. Yeah, to your point, I mean, the main vision for what we're trying to do here is really, remove the old canopy, replace it, allow more sun to get in there, get rid of that fence, because it kind of feels, to your point, like a little bit like a jail where it's closed off, create more of a pedestrian feel. We want to have, we're not necessarily looking for second floor retail, but we are looking for like service uses to make it more accessible to the customer. But thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Well, come on back.
Sorry.
You open the doors, now I got to just, anybody here like
Happy to talk.
have any questions for the speaker? All right, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this agenda item? Seeing none, I close the public record, or public hearing. Any questions, comments, deliberations from the commission? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Vice Chair Stevenson.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Collins. Mr. Secretary, will you call roll?
Robin Allen,
Approve.
Marcia Collins,
Approve.
Eric Costello,
Approve.
Lee Horn,
Approve.
Claudia Jolin,
Approve.
Doug McCoach,
Approve?
Justin Williams, Eric Stevenson,
Approve.
and Sean Davis.
Approve. Thank you very much, Ren.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is City Council Bill Number 24-0479, a rezoning for 901 West Mulberry Street, 317 through 329 North Schroeder Street, 222 North Fremont Street, 811 West Saratoga Street, and 203 North Amity Street in the 9th Councilmatic District. Eric Tiso will present.
Good afternoon.
Highlighted on the map here are the two groupings of properties that are the focus of the rezoning bill before you today. So looking at the aerials, we see the existing development. Looking north and back from the other way. So, and the purpose of this, of course, is to replace the public housing that is there that's hit the end of its lifespan, needs to be replaced. There's an overall plan to do that. And then on top of just a one-for-one replacement, adding in other affordable options and even market options to have a mixed income community in that area. So this is overlaying the old zoning, which are the red lines and the labels. So this was R8 under the old zoning code, which was replaced in 2017 with a new zoning code that is substantially similar in its meaning for the R8 and R9. So that olive color is the R8 in today's zoning code. The yellow to the west is the R9 in today's code, which is a bit more dense. So overlaying them, the lines, the red lines are the old code, the colors are the current code. You can see that there are some small changes between the two. Looking at, again, the purpose of fulfilling this, there's several overlapping plans for this area to allow for, again, the replacement of the public housing there and to get at that mixed community. On the order of 578 units, I believe, are what's necessary in order to make that happen. We believe that the rezoning will further that by allowing the density necessary, starting to resolve some of the setback variances and things that would not be possible if it were to remain R8 without substantial variances. Again, arguably, probably, there's still going to be a couple of variances that will be necessary, but we thought going R10 would be one step too far. So to try and balance those values, we believe that the proposed R9 is reasonable. So looking at the urban renewal plan for the area, which was created in 1975 with a 50-year span, so we got about 13 months left on it. This plan just predates me. I'm not old. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not old. The plan is. Stop laughing. So the plan is there. The land uses in the plan call for residential. So it doesn't affect it one way or the other. That's the point of showing that to you. So the Transform PO plan wanted this mixed income community with an increase in density in order to not just do the one-for-one replacement of what's there, but then of course you have to have an increased capacity to add the rest of it. And that was a 2020 plan through housing to make that happen. So it was talking about, and I think in the wording that was used in that plan, and it's quoted there in the second first bullet, the R9 district is intended for tall buildings surrounded by green space. That may have been a leftover idea of the prior R9, which was kind of the old tower style, higher density with larger lot typically, where you saw R9 around the city, that's what it was. But of course, it still enables lower 3, 4, 5-story buildings that get to the density that's needed without going quite that far. In today's code, the R9 and R10 are the only ones that have an FAR, floor area ratio, where you take the flat square of the property, multiply it by a certain number to get the total volume. So that, I believe, has an FAR of 3. R10 would go to 6, and that would get a much taller building. So again, balancing some of those factors led us to the R8. The Edgar Allan Poe House, a local historic landmark museum, it's not going to be affected one way or another by the zoning change. We just didn't want to leave one little piece out of the overall block. Yes, it's incorporated into the rezoning. No, it's not going to change anything for that. Looking at the overall requirements for rezoning, the commission is used to this. We have to look at the needs of the local plans, which are calling for this increase in density in order to achieve those goals, the needs of the city. Of course, we want to have a variety of housing options across the city and having more economically integrated neighborhoods. And for this neighborhood in particular, again, Homes is reaching its lifespan and it needs to be replaced. So those folks have to have some place to go. For the required findings, I believe we had recently gotten, but just within the past 30 minutes or so, we're able to upload to Wix a exhibit from the applicant to justify the findings for rezoning. If you don't see that, just reload your screen and it should be there. To summarize that, basically the substantial change in the neighborhood again is the lifespan being reached on Poe Homes, fulfilling these plans needs to have this zoning change. So we think it meets that substantial change in the character of the neighborhood. For population, there's been an almost 10% loss in population between the 2010, 2020 decennial censuses. Facilities, of course, are present and will be unaffected, likewise with transportation pattern. The other properties nearby will not generally be affected. So for equity, I believe in the applicant's statement, they outlined their outreach process going back to, I think, 2018. There's something on the order of 40-some meetings that they had with a variety of surrounding community organizations to let them know about the coming development plans. Again, our look here for rezoning is on just the rezoning in isolation without looking at a specific project. Those projects are not yet ready for the typical development review process that will be coming before too long, but we know that it's there. So again, that outreach has happened. And so we believe that the engagement has occurred. You will see a number of letters that are on record. Several of them express either serious concerns or opposition. In a read through them, I'm not sure if it's necessarily tied to this specific rezoning action, but more so the historic evolution of the overall project. I think the commission has heard that. Some of our veteran members will remember hearing this in times past. So some of those thoughts and feelings are still there and may need to be addressed. So you'll see those in your file. With that, staff believes that it meets all of the requirements for rezoning. We believe it's reasonable. We recommend that you adopt the findings and approve the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tiso. Questions for Mr. Tiso? Commissioner McCoach?
Is there for these sites?
There are a couple, and I'll look to the back. My colleague Nick Sheep
Let me
is
ask
the
you
community
real
planner.
quickly, when you say adopted plan, what do you mean?
And reading the letters from the community, I saw a lot of discussion about community centers and the need for community facilities. And it seems to me, in recent years, many of those types of facilities have been built as a part of redevelopment. And so what I was wondering, in response to the questions from the community, was if any types of community facilities had been identified in the redevelopment.
So, again, let me just clarify for my own sake. When you're talking about a plan, are you talking about a public redevelopment plan or private redevelopment plans that have been put forth for the redevelopment of this site? Or both?
I would like to know if there's a plan that this agency has seen.
Okay.
So the answer is kind of yes, both. So there are multiple adopted plans from the aging urban renewal plan to the adjacent plan unit development that is also aging to the 2020 Transform Poe plan, all of which kind of overlap this area in different ways. So that those are the formal plans. Separate and apart from that, I believe the commentary on the community space or community room is a separate deal through housing, as I look to the back of the room for some validation. Is that correct? So that is not to do with necessarily this new construction, I think. But the plans for what the new buildings that would be enabled by this rezoning, we're not there yet. We haven't got to development review. So I think there's some expectations, maybe some promises that need to be fulfilled, but I think those are from earlier iterations, not necessarily by this proposal.
Okay, I simply ask that question because it seems to me that the trade-off in density with R9 ought to yield community benefits. I don't, there's a logic to, consolidating development into tighter neighborhoods so that you have space to have a community center. And there's plenty of publicly funded, privately developed residential, multifamily residential buildings that have a adjacent attached community facility. So, I mean, it seems to me that that's where the proposed zoning and community interests could overlap.
Okay, for the record, I want to go on record. As part of any rezoning, there is no required community benefit. We may want to do that, but I just want to make sure that everybody understands when we talk about rezonings, there is no required community benefit that is associated with it. It either survives or dies on the merits of, was it a substantial change in the character of the neighborhood, or was it a mistake during the last comprehensive rezoning?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
And I think obviously what you're describing is exactly correct, but I think what you are describing is contract zoning, which is essentially illegal, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it is in Maryland, for sure, but there are, for example, Baltimore County has its planned unit development ordinance, which requires a community benefit in order to get a PUD applied to the land and so on and so forth. I respect what you're saying, Commissioner McCoach. I just want to make sure that everybody recognizes that although that may be a very worthy goal in this particular instance, it's not a requirement of any rezoning in Baltimore City.
And concur, and I think there was a slide that I had that I added that didn't get into this that shows that there are two adjacent PUDs that are kind of east and west of the two sites that squeeze between them. These two parcels are outside of both of them. So again, some of the promise of community meeting space may have been a carryover from projects within the PUD that are not effective here. And I'm turning to, yes, I'm being told that I'm right. So I wanted to have that slide there just again to show that there's a lot of overlapping things in this overall neighborhood. And I think there was some promises made that have yet to be fulfilled, though not necessarily directly as a part of this rezoning, but that still need to be addressed.
Anything else, Commissioner McCoach? Commissioner Allen? Commissioner John?
No questions, thank you.
Vice Chair Stevenson?
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Tiso. I have a few questions. So you mentioned, lingering thoughts and feelings from, the history of development and community conflict in Poppleton, which absolutely are still there. And it seems like there's community opposition and it doesn't seem like the community supports this. So being that, how can we, given that context, how can we support this?
So probably best address maybe to leave this for some of our housing friends, for Nick to talk about some of the background, but I guess that goes to the chairman's point. How can we, for this specifically? Well, there's nothing in a rezoning bill that obligates us to do that directly, that having been said. We want those conversations to be ongoing.
I don't think that that's the same thing that the commissioner was talking about.
If I can, real quick, to help you. Unfortunately, under Maryland law, the fact that somebody opposes this application, we respect. I think they have every opportunity. I hope they all will have the opportunity to stand up and speak and provide us their thoughts on why this doesn't meet the law. But it's tough because
Forgive me for interrupting you, Mr. Chair, but I mean, we have full control over this. These are city-owned properties. I haven't heard, it's,
No, they're not city-owned properties. They're owned by the Housing Authority of Baltimore City. They're federally
understood
owned,
the
yeah.
nuance there. The point is, why are we doing anything in Poe Homes or Poppleton in general without the community leading and the community support?
I agree with you 100%. I agree with you 100%. And ideally, we would have that community support. There would be a compatibility between what the applicant is asking for and what the community wants. But unfortunately, under the law, we have to base our opinion on the change or mistake rule. If we do not believe that there has been a change in the character of the neighborhood or a mistake in the last comprehensive rezoning, we say, no, you don't get your zoning. But if we say that there is, then there is, and despite the fact that the community opposes this. Now, I think it's incumbent upon us to say, why do you think, I mean, I have very serious questions regarding the change in the character of the neighborhood argument. But that doesn't mean I disagree with it.
Okay, so I made my point there. Next question, looking at the required findings, if the basis of the change is the MTA's Red Line project, which I don't think is inked yet, but why aren't we talking about TOD if that's the basis?
Great question.
And lastly, we don't hear about R9 very often. Can you give me an example of a modern R9?
Oh, yeah, other than in this particular neighborhood, I'd have to look at a map. I think up Charles Street, I think there's some R9 up there. Those are the ones that jump out at me. I'd have to look. It's not prevalent because it's the next step more dense than your typical, 35-foot height row home. And we do need to be careful about TOD because I get this question all the time from a variety of folks. So that can mean a couple of different things. We do have 4 TOD districts in our zoning code, which go up to 60-foot or 100-foot height. So that might be quite a bit more than the community would necessarily be interested in. And I'm getting a little bit ahead, but looking at our comprehensive master plan that we're in the process of working on now, we're for the first time having a generalized land use plan to help guide and govern future rezonings. So there's some denser residential called for this area. In addition to that, we're looking at having the quarter half mile radii around our transit stations as kind of a page 2, so that you have an either or a yes and, however you want to look at it, because smaller lots don't necessarily work functionally for TOD. So I think we're providing for that in the future. But depending on the nature of the specific project, TOD zoning is not always the right answer. So we're not there.
So, yeah, it's a timing issue. So we are preparing, as Eric said, a land use map for the comprehensive plan that will be based on all of the rail stations in Baltimore City, as well as some of the major bus route station locations. We're preparing that with the Red Line team, but they have not made final decisions yet. So we're a little bit ahead of a TOD designation for a Red Line station, but probably only by 6 months.
I only raised it if it's going to be the basis of the change in the neighborhood.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question.
All right, that's all, thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Williams, any questions?
No questions.
Councilman Costello.
I just wanted to commend my vice chairman for the question about R9. That one really made me scratch my head. That would be an outstanding zoning trivia question if anyone were to ever get on Jeopardy. And I know the only one of us in this room who has been on Jeopardy is my friend and colleague, Deputy Mayor Williams. But that would be some outstanding zoning trivia right there. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry to spot you.
What is R9? But the R9 is existing next to the, there's already R9 in the area, so that would make sense.
What is R9?
Commissioner Collins.
I can't top that. I just want,
I'm still just trying to be smarter than a fifth grader.
I just wanted to kind of circle back to the R9 issue and heights, because if I understood what I was reading, both in the report and the letters, there was some concern being expressed about the differentiation between existing community row house type arrangement and a taller, denser development adjacent to that. So I thought what I read had to do with the desire to have more units available than just a one-for-one. I believe you mentioned that. So I'm curious, now that we've been talking about R9, what kind of height differentiation would be allowed under an R9 in this type of situation? I realize we're not talking about a specific development, but that was a concern that I read about.
And I understand, some of the concerns over height, call back some of the recent buildings that have been built that are in the vicinity 6-story height, which feel quite tall to some of the residents, right? So that's, I think, their concern. Could something of that scale possibly be built? Yes. So that is a valid concern. And then I might be stealing thunder from the developers who can, the team that is here that can talk about that a little bit more, what they're looking at doing. But I think there is a range in a draft plan, and jump in if I'm wrong, of 3, 4, and 5 story buildings in a mix,
That should
but
have
not.
no impact on our.
No, it doesn't, but to answer the question, could that theoretically be buildable? Yes.
All right, thank you, because we really have a location here where you have, it's very close to a major
Right.
artery. I don't want to call it a highway, but a major and challenging
those two.
highway to cross. So that height differentiation wouldn't be, in that instance, so overpowering. But on the flip side, you have a established community with row houses, and that different
And opinions may
height has
vary
a
depending
whole
on
nother
which side you're on.
impact.
Right.
Okay, thank you so much.
Commissioner Horn.
And this might not have anything to do with the decision, but I just want to follow up on Eric's comment about community engagement, and particularly the conformity to plans. I didn't see a letter from Southwest Partnership, so I'd be very interested to see what they think about this and how it conforms to their plan. So if they're here or a representative is here, it'd be good to hear from Southwest Partnership. And the second is, I just want some specifics about community engagement. The assumption to me would be, as part of the choice neighborhood process, this would have come up, and extensive community engagement, particularly as it relates to this, would have had to take place. So just want to know what the process was, particularly. And I know housing is here, so maybe they can talk about that. But those are two of my questions. One, the Southwest Partnership, and the second is to have a little bit more meat on that bone in terms of community engagement.
Sure, and that, as to Southwest Partnership, I'm not heavily embedded in the neighborhood side. Defer to my colleague to speak to that if he can, but in the applicant's justification to support the rezoning, which hopefully should appear on Wix, in there was a detailing of all of the meetings over a couple of years span that they did. I think it was like 40 some odd meetings with multiple different organizations, and again, they can speak to that more specifically. Lots of meetings, lots of people reached. There may still, again, be differing opinions. Is everybody 100% on board? No.
No more questions from me.
So I have a few. There is an urban renewal plan for the site?
There is, and it will run through March of next year.
but there is an opportunity for that urban renewal plan to be renewed.
It could be, I would advocate for it to be replaced because it still has some antiquated terminology in it, but yes,
So what does the urban renewal plan say for this site?
residential.
Anything specific in terms of height limitations or anything like that?
No, I don't believe so.
No, but it does stay R8 as the zoning.
Well, the existing land use, or the existing zoning map just reflects the existing zoning that's there, but the parts of the plan that call for rezoning are a couple blocks south, so there's no proposal in the plan for these properties.
So there's no governance of this land use from the urban renewal plan?
Other than
it be-
residential, I don't believe
Other than it be
so.
residential? Come on up, introduce yourself.
I'm Nick Shupin, the community planner for this area. The urban renewal plan designates R8 for these two sites. So, yeah, for that reason, I think we recommend that it be repealed as it's lived its useful life.
Okay. So most urban renewal plans would have an overlay in terms of, or would have additional restrictions that would govern height and so on and so forth. This one does not.
No.
Okay, great. The argument that's been posed is that this is a change in the character of the neighborhood? Is that correct?
In our report, yes, and speaking with applicants' counsel, they also may have a view on this actually being a comprehensive rezoning owing to the number of parcels and the scope involved. So that should be in their brief. I only got to
That's
skim
not
it this
before
morning.
us right now. What's before us right
Sure.
now is a rezoning.
Yep.
If they want to introduce a comprehensive rezoning, that's a completely
No, I believe they would allege that this is a comprehensive rezoning because of the scope of how many parcels are included in this action.
Okay. But it's been proposed as a rezoning from R8 to R9, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the argument for the change in the character of the neighborhood is that these buildings have reached their useful life?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that-
Also that there's a lot of ongoing planning initiatives for the Highway to Nowhere, West Baltimore United, and the Red Line that are sort of forecasting or foretelling additional changes.
Okay. I'll save the remainder section of my questions for the applicant. Anything further for either Nick or Eric? Thank you both very much. So open this up for public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to speak on this agenda item? Yes, come on up.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Drew Tilden of Rosenberg Martin Greenberg. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. So preliminarily, I do want to address the question of whether or not it's a comprehensive rezoning. I thank Mr. Tiso for his testimony, and we would recommend or request that you adopt his recommendation for approval. But we also do believe that this is a comprehensive rezoning. There's no distinction in what we submit in terms of legislation. It can either be a comprehensive zoning or a single property rezoning. The difference is actually the definition of comprehensive rezoning. And I've got here Article 32, Section 1-304M of the code, which defines comprehensive rezoning as an ordinance initiated by city government that modifies the zoning classifications of multiple properties. In this case, it is 8 lots. It's based on the considerations concerning the common needs of a substantial geographic area involving a considerable number of properties. So this is generally the Southwest Partnership area. I'm going to address the extensive community outreach process that we went through in order to get to the transformation plan that presents this. It also needs to be designed to control and direct the use of land and structures according to present and planned future conditions. This I will address as part of my change argument. And then finally, it needs to be
Oh, you're mixing change and comprehensive.
Oh, yeah, it can be both. So we are arguing not only that there has been a change in the neighborhood, I know, we're covering all of our bases. But we do believe that there has both been a change in the neighborhood and also that this qualifies as a comprehensive rezoning, and it's not going to actually require that determination of change. That's the higher standard for the single property rezoning.
Okay, so we're wiping change off the,
Oh, absolutely not. It is both changed. I'm not giving it up. But we do want to make sure that we're putting on the record that we believe that this does qualify as a comprehensive rezoning in addition to the change that has taken place in the neighborhood. And finally, I just would like to address, since this was not spoken of before, that this must be the product of both the careful consideration and extensive study by the planning department. We've been meeting with the planning department over the proposed R9 designation for over a year to identify the best designation for these properties and the proposed use, and then also the review by the Planning Commission, and we are before you today. So a couple of things before I go into the presentation that I have prepared. I'd like to address the R9 designation questions. So the R9 designation was, I think as Eric mentioned, previously designed for very tall, dense buildings under the old zoning code. But the new zoning code actually says that it is for a mix of different development types, and specifically says that it's intended for mid-rise residential development types. So it does accommodate for taller buildings, but also the FAR calculation means that the height is really based on the size and footprint of the building. So I just wanted to address that quickly. I also want to note that the URP, while it does designate the property R8, as Mr. Tissot said, that R8 is just based on the zoning map, and it's defined by actually the residential uses in the URP, and there's no height limitations, just use limitations, and multifamily dwellings are permitted under the URP. So again, Drew Tilden, Rosenberg Martin Greenberg. I am joined by my colleague Caroline Hecker, as well as members of the development team. That's from GBHC and Michaels, HABC, MK Consulting Engineers, and as well as Mosley Architects. I want to note preliminarily, we are here before you for the rezoning. We are going to talk about the development that is proposed for this, but the proposed development is really in its infancy. It's the product of a 2-year community outreach process, extensive engagement, but we are in the preliminary phase of the design planning. And the reason we're before you today so early in the planning process is because there is the Choice Neighborhoods grant involved, and that requires the 1-to-1 replacement of the existing units. And then we also need to do 1-to-1 plus at least one of additional units that are at market rate or affordable. So that means that we have a required number of units that is at least 577. Right now we have 578 proposed. So we're really at the minimum level of density so that we can qualify for this funding. In terms of community engagement, I understand that there are a number of community members here today who would like to present. I'm going to address our community engagement process. Once we hear from them, I just request that we have the opportunity to respond. But this has been an extensive process. It started in 2018 upon the receipt of a Choice Neighborhoods planning grant. And for 2 years, the planning, both the development team and the Department of Planning and HABC worked with the community. The sort of head of this planning process, and I've included in our draft findings of fact an organization chart of this planning process. But the head of this was a steering committee, and it was comprised of every single community group in the area. There were also task forces, which were co-chaired by members of local community associations, including, I believe, Ms. Edie was on the housing task force, and we received a letter of support that we have in our file that we will submit after the fact because we just identified it from Ms. Edie and the Poppleton Now Community Association supporting the Transform PO community engagement process. There were also design charrettes because I'm not sure if the commission is familiar, but the transformation plan, it includes much more than just the redevelopment of the PO homes. It also incorporates all sorts of community improvements throughout the Southwest Partnership area. But the design charrettes were specific to the redevelopment of PO homes. They called for, and they were based on the input of the community. They identified certain priorities, and the development team, through these charrettes, said we are going to try and apply this development plan to them. So there was the 1-to-1 replacement of housing. There was the addition of mixed income community members, a diverse housing type sense, and also connected streets. So the development plan that I believe you should all have before you incorporates all of those concepts. And in order to have the 1-to-1 replacement plus the addition of a mixed income community, not only for the Choice Neighborhoods grant, but you are going to require that extra density no matter what if you want to add a ton of extra units. I'll also note that
The development plans you referenced, I didn't see the Wix site.
It should, are my findings of
Well,
fact?
also not yet in the.
Okay.
So I didn't see it in the Wix site either.
Real quickly,
The findings are here, but not.
when did you provide your findings of fact?
They're in there.
On Sunday?
I don't see it on mine.
They were just uploaded perhaps
Where-
half an hour
where's the
before
link?
the start of the meeting. So if you refresh, it should be there. If not, we can try and
It's
get paper
unfortunate.
copies.
that
They
we-
should be included as an exhibit to,
Okay.
Sorry.
I could tell you they would
you
not.
don't have it.
We don't have it, and unfortunately, unloading it.
You know, I apologize
I'm
that.
not gonna read a memo while we're going through.
No,
a
of
public hearing.
of course, and I don't expect that, but I do have,
I
it's
don't-
only
and-
one,
And I'm,
but I have a hard copy.
yeah, again, I'd rather listen to you, listen to the residents. It's unfortunate because I really would have liked to have read your memo. I always enjoy reading Caroline's. I'm sure I'd love to read yours. But it's just too late now.
Well, I guess on the plan itself, it would be useful, I think, to see the plan.
Yeah, I have a copy of the presently proposed plan.
Again, I hate to be a jerk, but a plan is irrelevant to a rezoning.
Yeah,
So, I mean, we can rezone this property and the plan that you're gonna present us could go out the wind and another plan could come in. So
yeah, absolutely.
Well, I respectfully disagree, because I think, the plan is the basis for the change in the neighborhood and it arguably a mistake, because there's now an adopted transform PO plan that is driving this, and so the plan that's been adopted is the change in what was happening, or I'm not sure the Florida.
Are you referring to the community plan or the development plan?
The development plan that's part of the transform PO choice neighborhood grant submission?
Is that the same plan that's being proposed?
I believe so.
Yeah, so I can clarify that. So the plan is nearly identical to what was included in the Transformation PO plan. There are a few less properties, and that's because HABC was not able to gain control. But it is, again, nearly identical to what was proposed in the plan. And thank you, Commissioner Williams. That reminds me, I wanted to go back to the change in neighborhood standard. I understand that there were some questions about whether or not this plan qualifies as a change. I do want to note that Maryland state case law indicates that change is not just existing change that has happened, but any reasonably foreseeable development that's coming in the future. And so I would note that because this is the product of intensive community outreach. It includes stakeholders in the area, the Department of Planning, HABC. There is a reasonable likelihood that this development is going to come to fruition, and that actually justifies the change in the neighborhood.
I'm gonna argue with you all day long about that. I've argued with your co-counsel on this. The mere fact that something gets developed is not a change in the character of the neighborhood if that development was consistent with the zoning under which it lies.
So I'd like to clarify, what's proposed under that plan is not consistent with the underlying R8 zoning. The transformation plan specifically says that the R8 designation is not sufficient for the proposed density.
So you're telling me that between the last comprehensive rezoning in 2017 and today, there are projects that are happening around this site that are being developed not consistent with the zoning that is there?
So I would like to clarify, there's Maryland state case law that states we don't have to demonstrate that the surrounding developments as they exist right now are a change. We merely have to demonstrate that there are reasonably foreseeable developments that are forthcoming that will result in a change in the character of the neighborhood. And this isn't me. This is the Maryland state courts.
Okay.
So with that in mind, I also want to note, I'm not stating that this specific proposed development is the only basis for change. The Transformation PO plan incorporates the entire Southwest Partnership area, and so it demonstrates that they would like to generally change the area, not just this Transformation PO plan, although that is part of what is contemplated in that plan that was set forth in 2020. All right. So moving forward, I just want to continue to emphasize the community engagement since there were so many questions about it. There was, again, the charrettes that are the product of this specific plan, that element of the Transformation PO that resulted in the clear need for this rezoning. And then on top of that, when this rezoning came about and we were ready to introduce the legislation, the development team went back to the community, which of course, due to their engagement in the planning process, was aware that a rezoning was forthcoming. But the development team went back to the community over the course of summer 2023 to explain that the rezoning legislation was going to be submitted and it was going to be submitted for the R9 designation. No, they also reallocated some of the units due to the community's concerns with height and density to make sure that we weren't going into the R10 designation, which would allow for significantly more height and significantly more density that would not be compatible with the surrounding area, which includes both row homes, but the row homes are sometimes 3 stories, they're 2 stories. The Poe Homes development is all obviously multifamily, but there's also the adjacent R9 district with the 5-story buildings. So the R9 district is compatible with the surrounding area. But in terms of the outreach that was performed in summer of 2023, that includes Holland's Roundhouse, Southwest Partnership, the Housing Committee, and the board as a whole, Poppleton Now, Poe Homes residents, Towns at the Terraces, and Berry Circle was not specifically presented to, but was alerted, and the members of the group participated in the Southwest Partnership program, in the Southwest Partnership outreach. So again, this project was always contemplated. The rezoning is not something that is new, that has just been set forth. The development team has done everything in their power to get an understanding of what the community wants, what the community needs. And then in coming to that conclusion, they recognize that there is a diverse population that incorporates the Southwest Partnership. There are various community groups. There are also residents, and the residents are diverse. So when they are taking into account putting together this plan with the varying input, there's no way to make everyone happy. But what they've done is taken what they got from the charrettes, taken the priorities of replacement housing, mixed income community, and diverse housing types. They have done what the community broadly asked for. And again, there are going to be people who don't like certain aspects of the plan, but all of those people also had the opportunity to provide input into what is presented today. So with that, I am going to take a break. If you if you all have any questions for me or the development team, I welcome them. Again, I just request the opportunity to respond to any community input.
So questions for the speaker, starting with Commissioner Horn.
No questions as of now.
Commissioner Collins?
No questions right now, thank you.
Councilman Costello?
No questions, Mr. Chair.
Deputy Mayor Williams?
I think it might be helpful, and I don't know if it's something you can answer, or the Michael's AHC team about, the roles here. So clarifying that the Housing Authority of Baltimore City submitted the Choice Neighborhood Grant application, and then once that was awarded, well, you can correct me if I'm wrong, then how that led to then AHC Michael's being on board for this part of the process?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's something that I can speak to, but I'm actually going to invite Kevin Gallagher from HABC since he was there through the whole process.
Before
okay.
you speak, hold on 1 second. Are there any other questions for this speaker?
No, but I guess, I'm not trying to see the link for the comment, but I'll look at her.
Okay,
You gotta refresh it.
Vice Chair Stevenson.
Thank you, Ms. Tilden. So thank you specifically for laying out the community engagement efforts and all the different meetings that you've had. So based on that, did your team come away with any understanding of why the community is still not supporting this, or why there are still objections from the community?
So I'm going to defer to Kevin from HABC, who has been in the process the entire time, but I am going to reiterate that not everyone can be happy, and I also believe it's impossible when there are so many different stakeholders in the area. You can't make everyone happy. I also believe that there is a very valid wariness in the community to development. I think that this group has long been left behind in the development and planning district and the processes in Baltimore City. I also understand that there is another development that is forthgoing in the community in the area that has left them particularly wary of development. And this group is not the same. But it is understandable. And as much as
Now you know why we have such a heightened scrutiny ourselves.
yeah, and absolutely, this is something that I recognize the entire development team recognizes, and we understand that we are presenting a plan in a community that has been presented plans in the past and made promises, and we are asking for this rezoning right now based on the plan that has been presented. But we believe that separate and apart from what the plan states, we believe this rezoning is justified, not simply based on the change that Mr. Tiso discussed and that I have also discussed, but also we believe that it does qualify as a comprehensive rezoning as set forth in the plan, in the zoning code. But that is my sense, and I will have Mr. Gallagher elaborate on that. But I want to emphasize that it's understandable. The development team recognizes that, and that is the basis of the 2-year engagement process that has continued throughout and was re-engaged for this rezoning over the summer.
Thank you. And so separately from the community concerns, this is just a general question. Any of the additional speakers can answer it, and I'm not trying to step outside of our limited focus here. But I am curious what's being proposed that's not permittable in an R8. I mean, when we think about the type of mid-rise multifamily development that is, being discussed. I mean, we saw that in Perkins, which we're gonna look at later. We rezoned that and it wasn't even necessary because they could have built that in an R8. So,
I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
totally legitimate. Your request is totally legitimate, and clearly I came across too harshly. We can listen to all of that, but it cannot impact our decision. So
Yeah.
please, I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
a great question, and it would hopefully help inform the residents here that are here. But I just think we can't tie our decision to, oh, that's a really nice plan.
Yeah.
Because as we all know, once the property's rezoned, it's rezoned.
Yeah, absolutely. So the proposed density is not permitted by right under the current R8 zoning designation. The minimum lot area is 750 square feet per dwelling unit and under R8, and this is approximately with the proposed units 650 square feet per dwelling unit. So it is close, but it is not sufficient. And then on top of that, we really do believe that, the mid-rise nature of the mid-rise and multifamily nature of the R9 district is most appropriate, especially as we're looking at bridging the gap between the R9 district adjacent to it and the R8 district and the row homes nearby.
Did that answer your question?
It does. And
Partially. I mean, if
No,
we're gonna go down that path, what about the height?
Yeah, so the height, it is likely actually permitted by right. It depends, because we're so early on in the design process that at this point we have footprints that I'm sorry you don't have in front of you. But we've got preliminary footprints, and what is proposed, there are 3-story row homes, which are going to be 2-over-1s, 3-story walk-ups, and then there is also going to be a 3-story elevator building over top of a garage. So absent engineered site plans, we can't really confirm what the height is going to look like.
But you're generally talking a 4-story building.
The last one will be a 4-story building.
And this is just a comment because you mentioned the adjacent R9. But most of the adjacent R9 is Excel Academy, which is curious why that is zoned that way. Sarah Ann Homes, which that was, if we could undo that, we would, and it's not being developed consistent with the R9, so that's a bit of a red herring. And then La Cité, which is not necessarily a precedent that I think we want to hold up. So I don't look at that map and see as much R9, I think, is being represented. But thank you very much for your presentation.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Commissioner John.
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Allen.
Oh, wait.
Commissioner McCoach. Yes, Commissioner Horn.
I just have a question in terms of timing, because I know the choice neighborhood designation is driving a lot of this.
Yes.
What's the timeline in terms of when we have to sort of allocate those dollars or have a plan in place to use those funds?
Yeah, so I'm going to another member of the development team. I will have Mary Claire come up shortly, and she can address the timeline more specifically, but we do aim to apply for choice neighborhoods next year, and in which case we would really need this legislation complete by the end of the session.
And just so everybody in the audience knows, the Planning Commission is a recommending body here. This is a city council bill that's promulgated in the city council. It comes before the Planning Commission for our review and recommendation back to the city council. So we are going to make a recommendation. It requires 6 commissioners to vote one way or the other in order to get it out of the Planning Commission and get it back to the city council. But we are not the final determinant of the outcome here. So with that, you had called up 2 people, and I believe.
Yes. So I have Mr. Gallagher, who is first from HABC, and then we also have Ms. Davis, who is from the developer.
Great.
All right, thank you. And again, we would just like the opportunity to respond. Thank
Okay.
you. In case you forgot.
Yes, Mr. Gallagher.
Hi, Kevin Gallagher with the Housing Authority of Baltimore City. So speaking, I believe I'm up here to speak to what Mr. Williams was saying. So this started in 2018 when we're considering to apply for a HUD planning grant. All right. There were 2 years of community engagement. You heard about the charrettes, updates, all of that. And then we actually put in for the grant in 2020. We were awarded the grant, which they approved the plan as it was laid out, not just for housing, but it goes to, the people component and work component and all of that. So that was a plan there. We also received some what they call action activities funds that the community was involved in. There, we put out an RFP. Anybody was allowed to come in. There were 4 groups that voted on the proposals. Poppleton Now, Holland's Roundhouse, Poe Homes, and Towns of the Terraces. They decided how they wanted to vote and score those proposals. There were 20 proposals altogether. 1 was thrown out because it missed the deadline. And then I calculated their things, and they were ranked, by the community, and the funds gone out to that. So that was what was essentially the final part of the planning grant. We're still finishing up getting those funds out, but we've been updating the community ever since. We have quarterly updates as to what's going on now, where the action activities lie, where the plan is going, because when we go to apply for a Choice Neighborhood Initiative grant, we have our plan. It has to be tweaked. So we're not starting the whole process over because we went through all that community engagement and stuff worked out before, but we will have to go back to tweak the plan that was initially proposed, because as Drew said, like some of the land that we were hoping to get, we weren't able to get. There are new, for the people component, there are new stakeholders in the neighborhood that we can engage with to get, programs there for the residents and the neighborhood. So the plan's not set. The plan that went to HUD and they approved is not the plan that will be implemented. But we have the hardest legwork done, but we will be going back to the community for that. So did that clarify enough, or do you need more specifics?
I think that was helpful to kind of to see how we got, because I think people I mean, I've lived the PSO process intimately, so it's think it'd be helpful for the other commissioners to know why it's being driven by AHC Michaels and not HAPC, for example.
Real quickly, if I can, was there any discussion regarding this, the redevelopment of this housing in 2017?
In 2017? No. We did not start this process until 2018.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for the speaker? Sorry. Thank you, Commissioner, Vice Chair Stevenson.
Considering all the community engagement that you did since 2018, what are some of the, I'm sure the community had lots of input, and it sounds like that input was taken in consideration. So what were, some of the developments in the plan that came from the community input, or how was that plan, different than it would have been otherwise if there hadn't been any community input?
So what we did is, there are certain requirements that we have to meet for choice neighborhood. But we reached out to Southwest Partnership for their community plan. We got their plan, and as well as Holland's Roundhouse, and we did extend it to Poppleton Now. We looked at the plan, but we didn't get a copy of the plan. So we tried to incorporate what those other plans had into our overall plan. There were people from Southwest Partnership, Holland's Roundhouse, Poppleton Now, chairing the various committees and on the various committees in the steering committee. So, we were getting input from all of them as well as the general public, because people from Poe Homes were also heading co-chairs of the committees too. So it wasn't just from the individual groups, just Sally from next door got to view her, voice her opinions, mark what they were looking for in the neighborhood as a whole. Even the footprint for Transform Poe is Mulberry, MLK, Pratt, and Cary. So it's really Poppleton Now, Holland's Roundhouse, and then a little piece of Berry Circle. So those community groups have been involved, as well as the Poe Homes residents. And then across the street is Towns of the Terraces, so they've been involved too.
Just for my curiosity, what is going on with the existing residents?
What's
the plan for the existing residents?
Oh, right now they're being relocated.
They're already being
Okay, yeah, we have started things. It's just not in a great condition, Poe Homes. So to avoid some of the things we had when we were relocating Perkins residents, we had to, suddenly their steam went out and they had no heat and certain sections had no water. So before anything, God forbid, happens like that, we have started relocation. It should work through the rest of this year to get them all relocated.
Thanks. What I'm getting at with all my questions, we didn't have the opportunity to see the development plan. That's not the basis of this decision, but I bet I don't need to see it. I bet I can imagine what it looks like. And so what we did all this, you did all this community engagement. It seems like the community or part of the community doesn't feel like that input was reflected in whatever version of the plan that they have seen. So I'm trying to understand to what extent were there concessions or changes? I mean, if we're building a 4-story building, are you saying that you set out to build an 8-story building and reduce the height due to community concerns? I mean, I heard that there's maybe going to be a community center, but I mean, is that something that you wouldn't have included otherwise if not for the community engagement? I'm trying to see where the community actually had an impact on this plan.
Okay, so I'll start with the community center first. So the community center that the letter was referring to is for Towns of the Terraces, okay? That is being renovated and that's a separate project. There are in the buildings on the Poe Home site, as well as where the old Jehovah's Witness will be. There will be community space in the bottom of those, okay? So there is some community space, but I believe the letter was referring to specifically a community space at Towns of the Terrace. Had we been able to get more land, we'd be happy doing nothing but row homes to put people in. Unfortunately, we were not able to. I know a number of members of the community don't want anything over 2 stories, but it's just unfortunately not feasible with the small amount of land we have. We're trying to keep it down as much as we can because we know, there is the kind of PTSD of the old big, huge high rises and all of the complications in that. But I mean, we can't, we only have so much space. And, if we're going to go for CNI, we have to have more than 1-for-1 replacement. I mean, we could, when we go in for CNI, it's not just the new housing. You get funds to do people things, to, programs and stuff that we couldn't be able to do otherwise. So we can replace Poe Homes without the CNI, but that doesn't really help the neighborhood because there are dollars that can go into the neighborhood coming from HUD that we won't have otherwise.
Thank you.
Commissioner John. Commissioner Allen. Commissioner McCoach. No questions. Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am. Tell us who you are.
Hi, I'm Mary Claire Davis. I'm with AHC. We are part of the development team engaged by HABC to redevelop Poe Homes along with our colleagues, the Michaels organization, who are also here today. So I think I was called up originally to answer a timeline question, but I can also help answer some of your questions as well, if that's useful. But as far as timeline on the implementation grant for HUD, great question. We wait for HUD to tell us it's coming. So generally it comes out once a year, mostly. Sometimes it comes out every other year. We want to be prepared for it to either come out at the end of this year or in 2025. Again, we don't control the Department of Housing and Urban Development and their timeline, but we're asking for this action so that we're ready because a lot of hard work's been done over the last several years. And we want to take that opportunity to have the engagement that's necessary for that application and really put together our best foot forward for Poe and also for the city.
And if successful, how much is the average?
So that's also a great question. The last couple of years, it's been between 50 and 75 million, right?
30.
It was 30 for Perkins, but it went up to 50.
50. Yeah, it's 50.
So again, that's dependent on the federal government and the budgeting process and things like that, which I'm sure we all agree goes very seamlessly every year. But those dollars can help forward the housing component, and as Kevin Gallagher mentioned, it can also go for other elements of neighborhood improvements, and that's what's happened on the east side with Perkins, Somerset, and Old Town.
The Choice Neighborhoods Initiative grant for this site has not been approved by, I mean, you're going after it, or is it?
Right. The Housing Authority applied for the planning grant, which they received. That was what generated the Transform Poe plan and the action items. And then putting together this whole plan, having the proper zoning, doing all of that, those pieces allow us to apply for implementation.
And what do you, this is a stupid question, I'm going to ask it anyway. What do you think the likelihood of getting the CNI grant is when you apply?
It's competitive, but I think that we are in a position that is better than others mostly because of the progress that Perkins, Somerset, and Old Town. I think the Housing Authority has shown that they can successfully implement that, and those phases are going really well, and homes are ready for folks to move into. They're under construction. The Housing Authority, in my opinion, is a high-performing housing authority in the eyes of HUD. So it's not a slam dunk, but it's a very strong application.
So you would understand the tentative nature of, at least me, to say, okay, we're granting a rezoning so that you can go after a grant, but if you don't get the grant, then the property's rezoned. Right?
It's a fair point. I can defer to our attorneys for some of the technical pieces, but, I think that it still is a good project, and I think it's still achieving that mixed income approach, I think is something regardless of HUD's choice neighborhoods, is a great public policy. We don't want to.
Absolutely, no doubt.
Yeah.
What we're seeing at Perkins PSO, I always say POS, but my hand's been slapped for that a few times. What we're seeing at PSO is very, very positive.
Mhm.
I mean, I think, if I'm not mistaken, one of the homes in Somerset, the one house, the one multifamily building has been open for over a year now, I believe.
Mhm.
What we're seeing in Perkins is very, very encouraging. No doubt about that.
So I think we would still want to pursue creating a mixed income community without the choice neighborhoods implementation. It will take a lot longer. There'll be less funds for other activities in the neighborhood that choice would support. But we're still committed, the Housing Authority is very committed to redeveloping Poe homes and creating a mixed income community.
Right.
I think it's a practical matter too, that we wouldn't have the money to do the.
Listen, I'm just laying it all out there because, of course we want the choice neighborhoods. In order to get the choice neighborhoods, you got to get, the property needs to be rezoned. But, okay, what happens if you don't get the choice neighborhoods? Absolutely we want the additional funding. And I agree that, I actually was given a presentation yesterday on all of the extra stuff that comes along with the choice neighborhoods. This, lack of a better term, the softer side of the redevelopment, the relocation of the existing residents, the return of those residents back into the neighborhood. All of that happens through that additional funding that if we don't have, how the hell do we do that? But
I'm happy to answer a little bit more, give a little more information on how the plan has changed in response to the community, if that's acceptable.
Please.
So in the Transform Poe plan approved by HUD, the plan actually contemplated over 600 units, so closer to somewhere between 620, 650 units. And it also contemplated 4- and 5-story buildings. The plan that we presented to the community last summer, and is the plan we intend to move forward, has no more than 3 residential stories. Some of the buildings will look like 4 stories, but it would be over podium parking. One, because we heard a lot of concerns about parking, and we wanted to make sure that we were including as much on-site parking as possible. And we also heard that a lot of residents didn't want a number of residential stories above each other to get in anywhere near even mid-rise. So we've limited 3 residential stories or less. So it includes a collection of low-rise and then mid-rise, but with no more than 3 residential stories. And we brought the number of units down to 578, which is really pretty much close to the minimum to be that mixed income community, while also preserving the deeply affordable units that are so important as well. And so, we couldn't get away from no apartments whatsoever, and honestly, we would want some elevator buildings because of accessibility for seniors who are aging in place, as well as a mixture of other unit types that include walk-ups and row house style.
are there any additional questions for the speaker? Thank you very much for the
Thank you.
Now, I open it up to anyone else who is interested in speaking on this agenda item. Please come on up, tell us who you are and what you'd like to say.
I'm going to be brief. Good afternoon. My name is Teresa Smith, and I represent Towns of the Terraces. I would like to just clarify a few things. when I sent you the email regarding the community center, it wasn't specifically for Towns of the Terraces, because I knew if it was built on the PUD that was mentioned in the meeting for the commission, it wouldn't just be for Towns of the Terraces. I was specifically saying that the community overall needed a community center. And the space that was slated for the community center was taken for something else. But I also have a question, and as far as the Poe homes, planning to redo the Poe homes goes back 23 years. That was supposed to happen after the Towns of the Terraces was built. The next step was to redo the Poe homes. So we're 23 years late doing that. The other important component I think you need to know is a lot of the residents opposed the high-rise buildings because that was what was already there. And when you get into family dwellings in a high-rise building, it doesn't work out well for the long term. It may be beautiful, it might be new, but in the long term, it doesn't really have a good ending. And are there 578 units currently occupied in the Poe homes? That was my question. That was the main question. Currently in the Poe homes, are there 500 and some units occupied?
No, ma'am.
Because
Okay, real quick.
the
just-
1-to-1 ratio was mentioned.
Yeah, I want to get to that too. Can, whoever from the team, yes, come on up. Come on up. Tell us who you are. You got to answer on the record for the camera.
Good afternoon. This is my name is Arlisa Anderson. I'm the manager of the Choice Neighborhood Initiative for Transfer and Poe and PSO. Currently, there are 288 units at Poe Home, and that 1-to-1 replacement is the 288 plus times 2 plus 1 is what's required of the Choice Grant. Right now, we have about 220 folks that are actually at Poe because folks are being relocated.
Okay.
Okay.
So there's a total of
Now-
288.
Correct.
If I multiply that times 2. and
Plus
then add
1.
1. I get
578.
578. And so there's where we meet them. Okay?
Correct.
Does that answer your question?
That does answer my question. And, which I still think that's not a reason to put people two on top of each other when you consider families. Most of it's not gonna be adult living space, it's gonna be family living space. And I question the amount of space they will have. If you're limiting the height and you're limiting the units per se, I mean, how much space will these people actually have to live in, actual living space? And I have one more question, and then I'm gonna let it go for now. Once these units are built and they're up and running and people have moved in, who will be responsible for the upkeep, and where will that money come from? Or is that part of the plan? Because,
Say my name again or just answer the question?
Go ahead.
Okay, so what happens is there will be a property management company that will be brought on board to take care of the day-to-day operations of the property once it's completed. And they'll
Okay.
be responsible for the buildings.
So that'd be a contracted service.
Yes.
By the developer and HABC
Correct.
to hire a property manager who will be on site 24/7, 7 days a week.
Typically, the property management has office hours of Monday through Fridays, typically 8 to 5. And then there's a 24-hour number if something arises when they're not on site.
okay, and who will choose the property management company?
It will be chosen by the development team, which consists of HABC, AHC, and the Michaels Group.
Okay, so once these units are built, how involved will these people who, the development team and HABC and the management, how involved will they be once these units are built? Because this is a major issue.
Okay.
And
I can speak about the PSO transformation plan because we're in the midst of leasing right now. So as far as leasing, HABC is intimately involved. And when I say intimately involved, we are a part of each and every leasing call until the properties are leased. And we speak to residents that have issues as they arise. Unfortunately, my cell phone number is in the atmosphere. So I get calls from residents if they have concerns. And we are striving to have as many of our existing residents to return to the newly developed property. That's what we're doing on PSO, and that's what we intend to do on the PO as well.
Okay. But you know, a lot of them won't be back. You know,
Well,
that
see-
doesn't happen.
She's absolutely correct, because they get that Section 8 voucher and they don't come back.
They don't come back. You
Yeah,
get
once they
new
get that
people,
Section 8
which,
voucher.
which is okay. I mean,
Yes.
but
All right,
it's,
real
does-
quickly,
Yes.
is there anybody here who has any questions for the speaker? Thank you very much, ma'am.
thank you.
Sorry, do you?
I'm sorry, I'm still.
Is there anyone else here who would like to speak on this agenda?
Actually, my question is for the young lady who have to.
Okay, we'll call her back up. in a second.
Ms. Teresa. Let me say, she wanna ask you something.
No, I think actually, forgive me, Robin, Commissioner Allen, who did you want to ask a question to?
The last young lady, but I assume that she's coming back up.
Well, she's coming back up right now.
Oh, okay.
You had a question for me?
Is not this speaker, but
Oh,
Choice.
you had a question for her.
But
Miss
I
Alexander.
assume- I'm sorry, I didn't want to come out of turn.
No. Go ahead. She was up there as well. So come on up, Miss Alexander. Anderson. Thank you. Forgive
But
me.
actually, my questions, you touched on, I was holding because I assumed it might be answered by someone that was coming. Sorry. Sorry about that. I was holding my questions because I assumed that they would be touched upon by someone that was coming up. So you did raise a couple of them, but it actually generated another question or two on my part. I appreciate your answer about 288 current PO residents because that was my question. Units, I'm sorry. Units, thank you for clarifying. That was one of my original questions about the one-to-one replacement units. So your last statement generates another question. You said often the residents who are voucher recipients who are relocated temporarily
Right.
and have the choice to return or not, they have first right of refusal. If they don't return, now I'm directing this to you, what happens to those units? And that goes into the other question that I wanted to ask. The 289 non-one-to-one units, are they considered affordable or market rate, which to me, there's a nuance of difference, or maybe not so nuanced. What constitutes mixed use here?
So the 289 will be low-income housing tax credit units and then market rate. So it would be all three. It'll be a whole bag of a mixed bag of units we call them replacement units, AKA public housing, low-income housing tax credit for the policemen and firemen and nurses, and then the market rate, whatever the market bears. So it'll be a combination of that. And we have experience doing that, and that we're doing that at the PSO transformation plan as well. We have 3 buildings completed at Somerset. Somerset 1 is, I get my trusty book.
Numbers. I have numbers.
So Somerset 1 is 104 units, and our Perkins families had the right to return, we call it right to return. So they had the right to come back and say if they wanted to take the units. But most of them that want to come back to Perkins. So of the 104 units that were leased at Somerset One, 20 Perkins families came back. 3 former Somerset Homes families came back for the 50 replacement units that's at Somerset One. So that's what we're seeing, and we've fully leased Somerset 3, which was only 72 units. And 11 Perkins families has said, yes, I want to come back, and 1 former Somerset Homes. So for PSO, it's a little different in that we have a tier of residents that can return. The former Perkins families have the first right to return, and then the former Somerset Homes families, they could return, and then we go to the HABC wait list.
Which is,
The public housing families that would want to come back.
yeah, I know.
The people that are
I'm
waiting.
just saying, that's important.
Yes, ma'am.
Because a lot of people don't.
We're not going to talk about how many it is, but yes, it's a lot.
Thank you.
You're
I think
quite
that
welcome.
hits everything.
It
And
does?
thank you for bringing that up because
Okay.
you expressed it better than, that's why I was waiting. You know, I have difficulty wording my stuff. So Thank
There were a lot of mistakes made with Towns of the Terraces. It was a very good project, but it didn't get the proper follow-through that it should have gotten. And it really didn't get the support that it should have gotten from HABC early on. But that's a whole different conversation. And this is why so many of the residents already living in the area who have put money in the area and purchased homes in the area, this is why they have concerns, not just in Terraces, but in Poppleton, Hollins Market area. That's why the people have so many concerns. It's fine to build it. It's fine to get the money and to do it. But what happens 5 or 10 years down the road? Are they going to look like you need to tear them down again? Or go through the same process? That's why we are questioning so many things and opposing so many of the plans, because the people had said from the very beginning, these meetings have been going on for at least 10 years or more, off and on, different developers. And the people said from the very beginning they did not want high-rise apartments. All the sessions, I have notes and notes and notes and notes. You don't want me to bring them in, really. Papers and papers. And the people did not change what they wanted. They're trying to accept some of what's being presented. They're not going to accept everything, I'm sure, but they're trying to accept some of what's being presented. Like the young lady said, everybody's not going to be happy. But, and it's just trying not to repeat the history of the overall community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for letting them come back up and speak.
Hello, my name is Paulette Curl. I'm the president of the Towns of the Terrace Renters. And I was on the Stern Committee. I did over 800 hours on that committee and the charrettes and everything to have them come back and rechange the whole thing. It was like a slap in the face and a waste of my time. That they redid the whole thing. So we asked Kevin, well, why was that change? He said, because HUD changed it. Well, how can they change it when they put us through all these hours? You don't see Ms. Jane Swar here. She's sick of it. My community has been suffering for years on. Years on. I went out looking for them vacant lots. Me and Miss Sonia Edie, the president of Poppleton now. And we was looking forward for a community room and homes because they never honor what they did for Hope 6. And my community is Hope 6. They built the school on our property. Okay, we really didn't accept that school because it's not for our kids. Nothing that was supposed to be in agreements was honor for my children to go there in my community. My kids are having issues seeing that pretty soccer ball field there and they can't go in there and play. We can't even have a meeting in there. I've been doing this for 8 years without an office. And it took me an hour. They helped me downstairs for an hour and 16 minutes. Now, the whole, from 2019 to 2023 and 4, I sent in numerous of videos from the vandalism or the kids and the gangs running up in people's houses. Most of my people has left because of this. We put out reports. They have it. Nothing is being done. There's so much work needs to be done in these houses. They are dry rot because they haven't been touched since 2020, since they've been built 23 years ago. I still have renters been living in there when they first came there. They wasn't offered to buy their home. We was told that we were supposed to buy our home. And we do not want to see no more high rises. We don't want people stack up on top of each other. We just got over that 20 years ago. All the tragedy and the killings and the drugs and all type of stuff that was going on before when there were high rises, those building over Somerset, it looked just like the high rises. It's not gonna match our community. And that's not what we asked for. They came back with a brand new whole deal and telling us, well, we're gonna accept it, but this is what it is. It's not what it is when we live in a troubled community where kids doesn't have an outlet to go to. Our community room wasn't built. My kids can't go to that school. So what are they supposed to do? Miss Teresa and I, we started the program in the Lower Circle. We have a Lower Circle with 4 benches, a reading program for the kids, because we don't have an office or anything. You know, all this is in our bylaws and our declaration. They had the money for the community room in the school. Only reason why we accept that school, because we thought we was gonna get, well, they gonna finish their promise, you know, because we have all the papers. All the papers. Miss Teresa had every paper from 23 years. And I think this really need to be looking into because it's a mess now. My community is suffering. I lost a lot of renters because of the violence. We lost Walgreens because of one house that live in my block that all the kids from the Poe homes, from different parts of the area, hangs in this house. And the mom let them do what they want to do. They have videos and all that, kicking in doors, even homeowners' doors, breaking windows. They kicked in my door twice, tore up my exhibit for my Juneteenth event. It's just so much going on, and nobody are hearing me. And I've been preaching this. And when I first came in, raising papers, saying that we had proof about our community room. Why doesn't nobody follow the bylaws of the declaration? That's what I want to know, because it's despicable. My community is suffering behind this. Now we paying for it. And we waiting to be renovated, which we've been waiting for since 2019. I've been packed up, my house been packed up since 2019. I have furniture on that way, thinking that I could bring it in, and I'm tired now. I need my home to be fixed. I don't want to go anywhere. I want to stay in the terrace because it's surrounded with all my doctor's appointments. And I have lupus, and my therapist right there, and all that. I have a front yard, I have a backyard. I don't understand. Was it a plan to have these homes look like that. I have videos of contractors taking old wood off of the roof and from one roof and applying it on another roof. I have so many videos of all the incidents. I reported to Eric Costello and I CC him and everything because it's despicable that we cannot get any help over here, you know? And we still waiting for our homes to be done. But who's gonna be held accountable for? Why isn't, I know it's been 23 years, but our bylaw's not over till year 58. And it's a lot. It's probably like 200 pages, right, Miss Teresa? I know. The zoning, oh, okay, we wanted that land on Marbury Street to be our community room. Well, this is the only chance that I had to speak on all the things that I've been speaking on since I came aboard. You understand? And I am getting beaten down. I'm tired because they doing things to me that's just despicable. But I need to fight for the safety of the kids, of my seniors. What type of outlet are they gonna have? We want it. That's why I went and picked 3 of those buildings, and I asked Kevin which one could be ours. You know, for our community room. You have to honor it. It was signed by you all. You received the money for it. And if they want to put homes up there, I thought they supposed to look like ours. And then the traffic, since the school came, you can't even get out your house to go to work. The traffic be from Marbury Street all the way up to Carrollton. How is this is really going to affect our community. It really is. So I done said my piece. I hope y'all take what I said in consideration and somebody at least do an investigation what's going on. Because my story never changed within the 8 years I've been doing this.
Thank you,
And
sir.
I done seen so much bad things since COVID came. If we would have had a community room, we could have settled a lot of things. So I appreciate you all taking y'all time out, listening to me. Thank you.
And thank you very much for serving the community and for your testimony. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak? Please come on up.
Thank you. Nicole King. I live in Hollands Market area. I'm a professor of American Studies at UMBC, and I've been working with Poppleton Now as a researcher since 2020. The member who was going to speak for Poppleton Now, I was at the gym, so I was not prepared to come, but their car broke down, and Sonia Edie had a death in the family, and she's at a funeral today. So I just want to speak very briefly on community input and to articulate residents' feel that they only get reached out from the city when HABC needs their input for a grant, like the Choice Grant, and they're not opposed to redevelopment in their neighborhood. And as someone said earlier, once this is rezoned, it's rezoned, and residents are fearful of zoning for high density without concessions for community needs after years and decades that I think Ms. Paulette and Ms. Teresa spoke eloquently to. So just to go over, in July of 2023, there was a meeting where this plan was presented, and there was a great deal, I was at that meeting, of community pushback on the plan put forth because of the buildings that were 3-story with the parking on the bottom. And yet residents are fearful of this kind of performative inclusion when they're consulted. I know there's reference to Sonia Edie presenting a letter of support, and I know Sonia, and she's been to all of these meetings, and she's not supportive of the current plan, though they do want the Choice Grant to move forward. They want HABC to work with them. So The email came from the Department of Planning. I commend the Department of Planning and Nick, the planner, for articulating the zoning changes. There was a meeting on January 29th with HABC and Planning where residents were able to express their dismay, which you have in the letter, about the plan and ask for concessions. They're willing to work with the city and to compromise. And last Friday, February 16th, Nick and Ren from the Department of Planning spent over an hour we have weekly Friday planning Zoom meetings, and they spent a lot of time answering questions. And then residents met Saturday morning at 10 a.m. for a Zoom to work on that letter that they sent to you. Then they met again twice on Monday and Tuesday on a Zoom to work on that letter that they sent to you. So I just wanted to talk about the input, even though Poppleton now couldn't be here today, and to just speak to that. So thank you. And I think that, the final thing that was brought up, the Southwest Partnership. Sonia Edie is the president of the board of the Southwest Partnership. Southwest Partnership is right now working on a housing plan. It's not approved yet. They presented it at my community meeting. They presented it at the Poppleton one just last week. And it doesn't include Poppleton as a focus area because of all of this frozen development problems that it's having, but it does include issues about displaced residents coming back. And as a researcher who looks at this, that rarely actually happens. So no one wants to see folks from Poe homes being displaced and not being able to come back. People in Poppleton want to see housing and they want to have a great community of choice. So that's the final thing that I'll say about the Southwest Partnership Plan, which should be approved in the next few months, I think. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker? Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Very briefly?
Yeah, very briefly. The Poe home renters, they don't have a president down there, so they contact me. It's sickly old people with their children taking care of them. That needs to be addressed, because nobody is trying to listen to them. I came to Kevin when we was doing a stern meeting about this situation. Nobody still haven't gotten in contact with these people. So a lot of them, the ones that's still there, are having trouble moving. They picking and choosing who, but I'm talking about the sickly people and the seniors. Why didn't the seniors go first? But they are there now, some of them. So they really need to help these people and get on board with it.
Thank you very much. All right, the public meeting, yes.
I will be speak
Yes.
as quickly as I can. Since Ms. Paula came back up, and you don't need to come back up, but to address some things that she said. First, I want to thank the community people that came up and gave them their perspectives, because I think that helps to address some of what Vice Chairman Stevenson asked about why the community is against some of this. It gives some perspective on that, at least to me. And I wanted to address some of what she said from, I want to call it a helicopter perspective, maybe. I was not in these projects, but I think where I was during my career gives me some insight as to what the issues are. For instance, Hope 6, and I don't want people to correct me now because of time constraints, but I may not be absolutely correct on some of this, but my viewpoint on it is Hope 6 was a program that existed when Townsend and Terraces was planned and built. It no longer exists. So I think what was planned could not be fully carried out because of what happened with Hope 6. And I think that's somewhat of a political issue, political changes that came after. Ms. Hecker is shaking her head. So I'm a little fuzzy on that, but I have some perspective on that I won't go into. The replacement of, what was it? Was it called Lexington Terrace Elementary?
Yeah.
that was there, because there was a promise to replace that.
Well, they received some of the money for it, the schools and the community.
And there was every intent to replace it. Unfortunately, the Planning Commission worked with the Baltimore City school system to do just that. And this is bureaucracy trying to do right, and unfortunately, it causes stumbling blocks that result in what you're talking about, and it breaks my heart. But the intent is good. It just comes out in unfortunate ways. What happened with that is the site where the original Lexington Elementary School was, that school was torn down. Planning Department worked with Baltimore City Public Schools to replace it after the townhouses were built. Baltimore City Public Schools gets a significant amount of its funding to build or replace or renovate schools from the state. The state has very specific requirements about the sizes of the sites required for anything that they're going to put money into. So we looked into, because I'm retired from Baltimore City Public Schools facilities, we looked into building that replacement school. We knew it was a promise. They would not fund it. They would not approve it.
My kids are scattered all over the city, going to school, from kindergarten on up to the 12th grade, all over. They not even going to school in their community.
And the Catholic diocese doesn't have the same requirements that the state does, so they were able to build the school. I can't at all address, although I feel for you, what's going on with what you described. I don't want to take up any more time, and I apologize for taking the time I did. I just felt the need to try to, it's not at all making excuses, it's more a matter of trying to give again, a helicopter view of some of the things that can happen that change what was well intended originally. It's not bad intent to slap the residents in the face or to say, we promised you this to bring you back, or to sell to the people who were new to the neighborhood and then snatch it away, although that is the after effect. Doesn't matter what the intent is when that is what comes out. But there are reasons underneath that historically get lost. And since I have some perspective on that, I wanted to offer that.
All right. Thank you very much. Clearly, there's a very long history regarding this and many of our other public housing projects in the city. The public hearing is closed. Deliberations and discussion amongst the commission. Any discussion amongst the commission? If not, is there a motion?
Just a couple comments. I won't belabor it, but when we do the equity analysis, or when staff does the equity analysis, it considers time spent by planning and if there's an impact. And as a community representative, both here and in my life, the amount of time that the community puts into these development issues and these community engagements, should also be considered. I mean, we heard 800 hours, we heard 6 years of meetings that people have been attending. And so that doesn't really make any difference here or there, but it's something that we should consider when we talk about equity.
I think that's a good opportunity for planning to, as we go through and our zoning code matures, some of the things that we have to evaluate mature. These are the kinds of things that help us, look at things differently. So I agree with you 100%. What collectively our citizenry is paying into from an hour standpoint, and endeavor is really damn important. So,
overall, I've got some concerns about this. I think the overall plan might be good, but there's got to be a way that we can get, if it is good, there's got to be a way that we can get the community, everyone on board with the same vision. And it's unfortunate, it doesn't seem like we're there yet. But that's all for now.
I guess my question would be, if we're going to be competitive as a city in the application, you have to have community support to go with the application. And so that will be my concern in terms of sort of community buy-in. I know part of the reason that is driving this is the application to the upcoming application, but the upcoming application, in order for us to be competitive, you have to show. And so that's just an overall concern. It might not affect my vote, but I think moving forward, not having one letter of community support for this is mind-boggling to me, and concerning. I mean, not one. And so that's something that you can't put a successful, to me, implementation choice HUD grant without letters of support from the community. And so we just got to work on that.
Any other
I would,
deliberations?
yeah, I don't have the report from council, but they referenced that, at least from the Choice Neighborhood Planning Grant, there was support on that. I mean, from hearing testimony, reading the comments, it did seem that people are aligned with recognizing there needs to be a one-for-one replacement and different housing typologies for this project. But the rubber hits the road on the zoning, unfortunately, and I suspect there was changes because of the lack of land that is involved with the other projects in the area. So like if the Lost Tay project and something else in that area, I think that was one of the visions for using some land there that would have helped diffuse the density, and we would have allowed for the desire to have just row homes or even single family or semi-detached property. But like the reality is the need to have the one-for-one replacement kind of is driving that. I think it's something we talked about in the last hearing too, about, in my mind, a lot of the concern is based on the nuisance or actual active quality of life issues that people experience in some communities, and we need to do a better job as a city to mitigate that, whether it's trash or actual crime. I was described by, I'm sorry, I forget your name, Ms. Carol? Paulette Carroll. And that's the issue for me. I mean, I have family, friends who were in Lexington Terrace in the 90s, and it was, obviously hell on earth. And so I recognize the concerns people have and the PTSD about high-rise towers, but there's large buildings in Canton that people survive in and are happy with. So there's an issue there. It's like that we need to figure out more broadly to address. And that's where like the extra choice neighborhood money can be helpful in my mind, is the actual softer side of doing the programming and the extra work that this mayor has been focused on, of like doing the wraparound services to make sure that we can help mitigate issues in the front end. And so that's why, I mean, for that reason, I'll support this rezoning.
Just a quick request for reorientation of what we're deciding on. We're looking to decide to switch from R8 to R9, R9 being more density in the residential area, to have the proposed plan that was put, not the plan, just we're doing more housing in this area to mirror or reflect the PSO project in similarity. And does this R9 fit into the current character of the neighborhood? Is this what I am deciding on?
Correct.
Thank you.
I think that you framed the issue very well, but the deciding point is not whether it fits in the character of the neighborhood. It's
So there's, in the rezonings, there's two things that are going on here. First, there's the potential for the rezoning. If we consider it a rezoning, there's only two ways it can be rezoned, is that there was a mistake that was made during the last comprehensive rezoning in 2017. The council didn't know that this was going to be redeveloped in a year, and therefore, the discussions would have started in a year. Had they known, would they have rezoned this property differently? That's the classic mistake in rezoning. It doesn't mean anybody purposely screwed up. It just means, oh, if I had known that that was going to happen, I would have done this differently. Or there's been a change in the character of the neighborhood. And I'm dying to get the citation from council, which I'm sure that they will now provide me regarding the case law. But in my professional history, a change in the character of the neighborhood is something happened in the neighborhood that was unforeseen, that literally, oh, wait a second, during the last comprehensive rezoning, they didn't know that this highway was going to come through, or this sewer line was going to come through and serve an area that heretofore was not sewered. There was some substantial change in the character of the neighborhood. I'm going to take council's position as they've stated it and say that, you know, the fact that that property is being developed in accordance with could substantiate a change in the character of the neighborhood. Personally disagree with it, but I'm going to take their so that's one side of the equation. All right, it's either a change in the character of the neighborhood or they made a mistake. On the other side of the equation, they raise a very good point that there are multiple properties here in two separate locations. All have been posted and everything like that. And so should this really be considered a comprehensive rezoning? This commission has done that previously during my tenure. We have looked at these and we have said, oh, this is more of a comprehensive rezoning application than what we call a piecemeal rezoning. So I hope that helps. Probably doesn't, but I hope it does.
A counterpoint to your assertion on the change is, like, we traditionally have used the urban renewal plan as the basis to justify rezoning as long as I've been practicing. And so that's the same thing. It's like a plan that has been duly considered is justifying the rezoning. And so here it'd be the Transform Poe plan, but usually it's the urban renewal plan for Inner Harbor.
That's actually a very good point.
Thank you.
Right there.
I think I agree.
Can you repeat it?
So what happened was the rezoning happened in 2017. In 2020, Transform Poe came around. And a group of people got together and they said, this is what we want to do. After the property was rezoned in 2017. Does that justify a change in the character of the neighborhood? That's a legitimate change in the character of the neighborhood to me.
It'd be an ironic one if that plan specifically said
something different for this site.
Yeah.
Well, I think as described by everybody, it called for 4- and 5-story, 6-story development, and then with back and forth with the community. It sounds like they reduced it from 6 stories to 3 over a parking podium, or 3 just by itself. So that was that part. And then I guess to finish the sentiment after the change mistake finding, then there's then you pick what zoning district makes sense. I think in a vacuum, TOD would make sense, but the community already has concerns about density, and R9 gets the job done, and it's consistent with the neighboring property. So that's why I support R9.
Yeah, so the other thing to consider when you're doing this is this a spot zone where we're introducing an R8 into a C of R5 or an R9 into a C of R? I mean, is it really weird? But immediately adjacent to this site is R9 in other areas. So it wouldn't, in my mind, be considered a spot zone. There is other properties in the area that are consistent. I hope that helps.
Mr. Chairman, could you finish your thought, because you were comparing the comprehensive versus the.
So the comprehensive rezoning doesn't have there's no standards of review.
Okay.
There's literally, it's being done, so when the city went through and they evaluated their comprehensive plan, or their comprehensive rezoning in 2017, they just said, okay, this is the reality of this. At the time, we didn't even have a land use plan in our comp plan, in our master plan, which is going to be very, very interesting when our Baltimore is passed and there is a land use plan, because a lot of these conversations are going to be a hell of a lot different when it comes to rezonings.
But I meant in comparison with the staff report versus what we heard today, that this could be a comprehensive rezoning. So are the findings different for comprehensive versus, that's what I'm trying to get back to.
Yeah, there are no standards correct me if I'm wrong, but there are no standards of review for a comprehensive rezoning like there are. Every time Eric goes through this, he has his findings of fact and whatnot, and his standards of review. To my knowledge, there are no such things for comprehensive rezonings.
Yeah, you're correct, Mr. Chair, and we habitually, despite the suggestion that it's maybe not strictly necessary, we still go through the exercise in the staff report as a belt and suspenders and duct tape, just in case, we would rather over-justify than not at all. So we still go through that exercise regardless.
So if you were to look at this from a comprehensive rezoning and say, does it make sense for this to be R9? That's your standard of review versus a piecemeal, which is, it's got to meet this change or mistake argument. Any other deliberations, discussions amongst the commission?
In what argument would it not be comprehensive?
I was thinking.
What's the determining
Yeah, I was
factor?
thinking, well, there's a definition in the code, but I don't know if we need to go through all of it if we're all kind of
No,
aligned on
I
the change
just,
mistake.
I want to make sure it's not blurry.
Oh, it's very blurry.
The-
I mean, it's very, to me, it's like, this is typically comprehensive rezonings are initiated by the public sector, not by a private entity coming in and saying, hey, this area should be comprehensively rezoned. That's not mandated by law, to the best of my knowledge, so that's not a criteria that we should abide by. But that's typically the way it's done, is the city comes in and says, hey, we're doing this rezoning, or Baltimore County does it every 4 years and stuff like that. So with that, is there any other deliberations? If not, is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll move to adopt the findings and approve. And I'll just also note for community concern and feedback that there would be multiple steps in the process. This is just the rezoning, and then for the actual development, there will of course be, multiple approvals for that part, and then also there'd be a city council hearing. But so, making the motion to adopt the findings and approve as the staff report as listed.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner McCoach. Mr. Secretary, will you call roll?
Robin Allen.
Approve with reservation.
Marcia Collins.
Approve.
Kelly Bourne.
Disapprove.
Claudia Jolin.
Approve.
Doug McCoach.
Approve.
Justin Williams.
Approve.
Eric Stevenson.
Opposed?
And Sean Davis.
Approved. It passes 6-2. So technically now, this is out of the Planning Commission, and it's been moved back to the City Council with a recommendation of approval to rezone the property R9. I think everybody in this room who participated in this recognizes and appreciates the fact that there's clearly a lot of discussion that needs to continue between the HABC and the developer and the community. So thank you all very much. Next on the agenda.
Next on the agenda are two items together. Minor subdivision final plan for 1600 Bank Street and Perkins 4 in the 12th District, and a minor subdivision and revised development plan at 217 South Bond and Perkins 3 in the 12th District also. Caitlin Aldet.
And just to note that if anybody's interested in what a choice neighborhood project looks like, you can hang out for a little bit.
Very short.
Go for it. Okay. I have for you the minor subdivision final plans for 1600 Bank Street, which is Perkins 4, as well as the minor subdivision with revised development plans for 227 South Bond Street. It was also noted as 217 South Bond Street in the agenda, but 227 is correct for Perkins 3. Matt DeSantis and I are the staff. The petitioner is KCW Engineering Technologies. HABC is the owner. This is in the downtown planning district, for which I am the community planner. So here's the Perkins master plan. We'll be talking about the Perkins portions of the PSO plan. And just to provide some basic background, I'm going to give you just a brief update on where Perkins stands now. So this table shows the various phases of the Perkins portions of the PSO plan. And the buildings under review today are Phase 3 and Phase 4. So as you can see, Perkins Phase 1 should be completed next month, which is very exciting. And Phase 3 and Phase 4 will begin construction. They're in for permits at the moment, so soon. And so here's what is at Perkins right now. So if you drive over there, these photos were taken by Matt a couple days ago, and it's looking fantastic. It's really exciting. I urge you to head over there and take a look at what's happening and what a choice neighborhood can look like. I think it's a little unfortunate that we scheduled this a bit out of order.
Yeah, I think you know people in the department, you should probably talk to them. That was a beautiful four-story.
Yeah, they're beautiful. That's why I was like, please stay. So yeah, these are, you know, and even the walk-ups, you know, some of the units, even in the 3- and 4-story buildings that are multifamily, do have walk-ups, and it has a great neighborhood feel. Additionally, so the Somerset portion and Old Town portion, you can see here what's been completed. So Somerset 1, 2, and 3 are fully built. They are occupied, and Somerset 4 is in the works. So located at the northwest corner of Orleans and Central, they have a signed lease with the Lidl grocery store as of last fall. I am working with them now on signage. So, you know, things are moving forward really quickly, and it's very exciting. And so here's some images of Somerset 2 and 3. These are the Ruby and Ella. And again, you know, this is just fantastic new construction directly adjacent to Old Town Mall. And once we get the South Central or North Central Park, also known as the Nathaniel McFadden Learn and Play Park, and Somerset 4, it's really just going to be spectacular. So the two actions before the commission today, the first is the request to split the property in. The first is Block F, and it's the final development plan for that portion of the property which was previously split. And then the second is for Block E, and this is for the revised development plan for the subdivision that was completed previously. And so here's a plan showing the proposed development, so you can again see a little bit more about what's going on. The portions that were pictured were here, over here. This is Phase 1 and Phase 2. And this is South Central Park, where we're having a pre-development meeting soon, so that will be coming online a little later. The portion in gray, this is a market rate portion of the property, or portion of the plan that will happen at a later date. But everything in yellow, that is the choice neighborhoods, replacement, affordable, and market rate housing. So really exciting. So next on, these are the buildings for the site that have been that were demolished previously, but this is the site of Block F. And here's a view of Block E. And this is the existing conditions plan for Block F. So again, you can kind of see where those historic buildings were and what's proposed. And this is at the corner of Bond and Gough Street. And here's the landscape plan. It's in two, because we have one that shows the landscape on the outside of the site and one that shows the landscape to the interior of the site. You can see, you know, the street trees, the bump outs for parking, and most of the properties have a small playground or outdoor space, depending on who the intended user is. If there's going to be 3 and 4 bedrooms, then they have playgrounds. As it's anticipated, there'll be children. The south elevation, I'm going to speed through these elevations because they're not that exciting. And here we have a rendering. So this is the rendering looking northeast from the intersection of Bond and Gough Street.
I got a bigger bike.
And then this is looking, rendering looking south down Bond, and then looking across the park at the Bond Street facade. And then for Block E, this is the existing conditions. The final subdivision plat showing the line there. And you can see the 2 development parcels And again, with the landscape, with the landscape on the outside of the site, on the inside of the site. Elevations, this is for the northern portion. And here's that rendering of the northern portion. This is looking kind of southeast. And then for the southern portion, these are walk-ups. And here's what it looked like if you were looking northeast from Bank and Bond. So the impact, the long-term impact is that Perkins Homes will create an integrated community in Southeast Baltimore for mixed income opportunities with a new school and a park. And this subdivision application will help facilitate that. The replacement of all of the former low-income bedrooms with new construction low-income residences, along with the new market rate, will create a new mixed-income Perkins and a much healthier place for all the residents. For engagement, the PSO planning and development process has had heavy resident participation, led by HABC. There were project updates and lots of participation. So no impact to internal operations. A wide variety of stakeholders were notified and the site was posted. I've included some of those groups here. And so we recommend approval of both items. Any questions?
Questions for staff? Commissioner Horn?
No questions.
Commissioner Collins?
No questions, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Costello? Oh, he left. Deputy Mayor Williams?
Is there a reason this is before us as a minor plan? Because
We-
someone opposed? Not that I'm mad at
No,
you.
we made a commitment early on in the Perkins process to bring all subdivisions and follow-up things to the full planning commission. So it's just maintaining that.
Not that I'm opposed to keeping our commitments, but then thinking if it's for charging architects or if it's just us.
We're paying for Matt and Kevin, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's just.
They don't mind, they're sitting.
Well,
there.
they've already paid, but I
Going
mean, this is, well, we're
Throwing
trying
hours and playing
to, I'm trying to
games
find
on
every
the phone.
penny possible for this project to get done, and so the more we can
I
save.
know a whole lot about Pro Home, so I
I'm sorry, I mean, it's probably a discussion offline, but I do think, yeah, I mean, we're trying to stretch every penny to get this project done, so if we can avoid wasting architect billing.
By the way, he didn't mind this when he was a lawyer in private practice.
I actually seem to remember you here quite a bit.
It's good billable hours. All right, so Vice Chair Stevenson.
No questions.
Commissioner Jolin.
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Allen.
Oh, thanks.
Commissioner McCoach.
No questions.
And I have no questions. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to speak on? Thank you very much, Ms. Audet. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, I close the public hearing. Any questions, comments, deliberations from the commission? I would suggest that should we vote on these separately? So I would need a motion for the minor subdivision final plans for 1600 Bank Street for Perkins 4.
I'll make the motion. I also recognize just all the hard work. I see Stacy already left, but yeah, no, it's been a lot of work from everybody on this. So yeah, I appreciate all the stuff that's gone into this and looking forward to this coming to fruition.
So moving
to approve.
Commissioner Williams, any second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Horn. Mr. Secretary, you call roll.
Robin Allen,
Approve.
Marcia Collins,
Approve.
Talib Horn,
Approve.
Claudia Jolin,
Approve.
Doug McCoach.
Approve.
Justin Williams.
Approve.
Eric Stevenson.
Approve.
And Sean Davis.
Approved. Now, minor subdivision revised development plans for 217 South Bond Street and Perkins 3. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner, or Deputy Mayor Williams. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Horn. Mr. Secretary, you call roll.
Robin Allen,
Approve.
Marcia Collins,
Approve.
Talib Horn,
Approve.
Claudia Jolin,
Approve.
Doug McCoach.
Approve.
Justin Williams.
Approve.
Eric Stevenson.
Approve.
And Sean Davis.
Approved. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Planning Commission work session, preliminary capital improvement program recommendations. Can we get,
25 through 30.
5 minutes? 5 minutes, cool?
You want to smoke? There's a balcony. You have a smoke on like 30 feet away.
I don't know.
I can get you to Alice's balcony at least. Or
I'll take any of it. Shit. I don't know.
I feel like someone was like, oh, I didn't know you can even go out. I was like, didn't know it worked.
They're pretty good guys. They don't even know.
I remember when Mary Pat used to smoke in the office despite the, yeah,
I heard her husband passed away.
yeah,
This past week.
last week, yeah, yeah.
Was he sick from?
He wasn't that old.
Oh, well,
What's that? No, he was like 78 or something, yeah, I think.
My wife read their article and she made it
Yeah, he wasn't bad. I didn't think so. He fell evidently. He wasn't
I
developed.
know, but I never accidentally developed.
The only thing I know he developed was that those zero lot line houses on Moravia. There's a stretch there by the apartment complex. They're zero lot, like one side is on the lot line. It's the only one I know
But
that.
he owned the land, the country got together.
He got the one in RFP and couldn't put it together.
I think the one in the corner of. Fayette?
Southern?
Right, like the SunTrust building, or it's Nally Fresh. Didn't he have that building?
I didn't know that, yeah, uh-huh. He didn't have the Southern Hotel site, I don't think. Anyway. Can't believe we spent so much time on that.
Last one? Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's hope, I'm kind of missing a budget meeting almost.
I think I should tell Janet to get letters of support next time, like that was sloppy to not have
I don't
any.
think they want support. Or I think they had some support for the plans, not the rezoning. I mean, I think he nailed it, it's just the residual,
Yeah.
people are just mad.
Can you imagine a neighborhood that has had more change than this one?
Yeah, or the slow change, like, they're mad, and they're blaming the city, but it's like, loss of taste.
Yeah, yeah, that's the bottom of all of it.
Well, I'm happy to.
Yeah, they're gonna ask you the same thing.
Okay. I was like, I gave Director Ryer an update earlier, but I essentially like spilled the beans on our plan. So to the York Road Collective group, so that's like Loyola, York Road Park, pretty much all of them like major players. They had not seen Senator Washington's capital budget ideas.
I don't know if I sent
Did you
it.
send it
Did
to
I
us?
send it to you?
There's a new one. There's a new
What's the new
one.
one?
She has a treatise dated early January of this year that she sent me. She acted like, you haven't seen this? And evidently no one's seen it. And I can't figure out who the audience is. I think it's her fellow senators.
So it's like
I can send it to
is
you.
in the draft of the not CTV, the
I don't
budget
think
legislative bond initiative, or where does it live, or just, she's wrote it.
She just wrote it, yeah.
Just some Word docs.
It's dated a week before the session started.
But Director Ryer hasn't gotten the written permission, I guess, from her yet. So you'll follow up this week.
I sent her an email
What
and I
did her
haven't gotten a
treatise
response.
imply?
What's that?
So what did her treatise cover? Like, she's putting in new bonds?
Oh, vision for York Road.
Right,
For until
but-
2028.
And she has new bonds going towards York Road Collective or York Road Partnership or something?
Yes,
I don't
and
know.
there was like a York Road, everything that came from the York Road traffic study is also in there. So this isn't just for like this year, this is for the next several years.
I guess you haven't looked to see what's in draft law, like first reader of, I don't know if it's out yet.
For this year, I don't know the deadline, but no, so the conversation on the phone with their chief of staff, they offered a new bond bill to pay for the consultant, for the P3 consultant. So I guesstimated 300,000 for that.
Okay.
And
Oh,
that, so I wrote her
but
today.
She wants to keep the current, the one from 2 years ago.
Right, so we didn't have to dig into the 3 million.
No. Yeah.
I think they're just looking
Meeting
for,
with Dr. Brooks, I think there's like the board of directors of the CAP. Citizens,
the head of-
whatever it's called.
No, CA, Community Action
Community
Center.
Action
Community
Center,
Action
yeah.
Center.
So I think there's a board, they sort of report to it, but I think
Yeah.
I think it's more like,
It's like 4 people,
yeah, I
5
can't tell how functional it is, like, 'cause like Millwood has a board that they consult with, but it's like still Millwood though.
Yeah.
I mean, with Dr. Brooks next week, with Dr. D, she didn't have an objection, so I just wanna talk to Dr. Brooks to make sure she's fine. And then
Yeah.
if you ask her, should we brief this board or not? So that's great. And then the Dan Pontius, that's what a separate, is that, do I need to do anything? Do you help
I mean,
on-
I feel like until we have, like, okay, the official okay from Senator Washington, she's on board with everything. I kind of like gave them a heads up
Yeah.
already. And then there's like a few things that we're following up on, the mayor's walk in Woodburn
That's what I meant,
McCabe.
yeah, is that separate, is that, are you doing it together, which is fine?
Yeah, and that's what he said, he would like to do it together. And like, just for you two to know, like Dan Pontius and Phyllis Gilmore, who's like the actual president of Woodburn McCabe, like aren't seeing eye to eye on everything. So like, there's just some like internal neighborhood stuff too.
I
Never,
saw that
never,
before.
right? That
Really?
never happens.
So what we would want to do, we can timeline this, but we could start putting together the RFP early. Like, we don't have to wait
Yeah.
until we have the money. We
Yeah,
can do that.
and like we can set a date for a meeting. It's just like, here's what we want to do. But I just before we like say, here's what we're gonna do. I don't want Senator Washington to come in and be like, no, that's not what I agreed to. That's not what I said.
Yeah, right.
So.
Appreciate the work on that, yeah, so then, do we have keep us on task, I guess we're, next
I just
Friday,
checked
we're
in.
meeting Dr. Brooks, but do we need more from?
I just checked in with Sean. Me and Sean are on it. We're bros. And then I'll check in with you next week to see if.
Yeah, I didn't copy anyone on this because I didn't want to like wave a red flag, so.
That's fine, it's great, and then, perfect, thank you for that. I talked about the Webster Center.
I think we're going, what, no.
Yeah, if people seem on board with the plan, but kind of, that's what's in my plan, letting health do it. Health is interesting, I'm like, well, health, let me know, BDC did it.
You're great.
They tried like 10 years ago, 15 years ago apparently.
They did a P3 for Wexter?
They did an RFP and they got pretty far ahead, and then Collins said he was the one who killed it, because like, they wanted, it was during the recession, they like wanted to convert to all studio, like 700 studio, which I'm not a huge fan of, and they stopped, and then things paused, but.
All right.
Look at it again.
Yeah.
Let us reconvene.
I saw an article about the building across the street, yeah, Jack Dana. Yeah, we would work with Mount Vernon to the RFP, we can do that
Eric,
whenever you want.
How did that memo not get on the Wix page?
Start with
If she sent it to us on Sunday.
I'm pulling multiple directions and didn't see this.
Okay.
Honestly, that's how it happened when she walked in. I said, hey, by the way, did we ever get this?
He tried to open his computer and his wife yelled at him.
Unfortunately, that's on me, not Nick. 'cause
Okay.
we support him all of it.
Let's go ahead and reconvene. We're missing Commissioner Allen, but let's go ahead and start so that, okay?
Great. Okay, so this is a working session today to present to you the preliminary recommendations. We'll be back in 2 weeks for you to vote, but a chance to ask questions, a chance to dig into the details and make sure you understand the reports and the materials available to you and have any discussion you want to have. So this can go as long as short as you all want. As you all make it. I'll limit the overview. You all know, the requirements, 50,000, let's keep that in mind. Participating agencies, we're at this part of the process. Yeah.
At record speed.
Yeah. I do want to spend a minute talking about our process this year. We went through a slightly different process than usual with the agencies. So usually we'll give a target range and tell an agency you'll get between 10 and 15 million, give us $15 million worth of projects, and we'll give you at least 10 million, but you'll get something in the middle. This year we gave them a target that is approximately what we expected to be able to fund. And so we allowed them to create as many projects as they wanted, to put whatever they could on the record that they could execute if they got funded this year. But then tell us what they wanted funded within the target. So that's kind of how we got at their priorities, but so that we could start to build this list of the whole universe of projects that we might fund, that we talk about every year. So you won't see a ton of changes recommended this year. We pretty much stuck with what the agencies asked for with a few exceptions. So I'll spend the majority of the time on the exceptions and go really quickly through the line items.
In prior years, I just took a guess. So do we give them a target?
We gave them a range. So we thought we would probably fund 12 million for DGS. We would tell them to submit 15 million worth of projects, and we might fund 10 million or 12 million or 13 million, depending on what came in. And
So prioritizing them is in their hands, prioritizing the project.
Yeah, no.
yes. Yep.
Primarily.
Primarily.
It's primarily in their hands, but I
Yep.
mean, planning has a very important say in some of that stuff as well.
Yeah, but this gives them a chance to sort of put it out there first.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And the delta in prior years was, we were always given a kind of a target, but not a real target. I mean, it was, the finance used to come in and say, you can expect around 90 million this year, but it may go up based, to 15 million. So we would tell the agencies, give us your list, and that's why the range, so that we knew what other elements, hey, if we got that extra money, we'll throw in these programs too.
So you had a backup, basically, extra money.
I have to take a minute to say a word about the data that we're working with. We have a new system of record this year, which is really exciting. We're going to be able to do so much. You've seen the new report. Eli's already taken it and done some incredible work to make that report look good and informative. We've got to fix the data in the system of record, which is Workday. So we're leaning hard on that right now, and sort of the next 2 to 3 months, we're going to do our best to get the data cleaned up. Yeah, we had a moment. Once we get the data, once we get the data cleaned up, then we're going to consolidate projects. I don't know if you all are aware, but we have this legacy of budgeting into reserve accounts, but then when agencies want to spend it, they have to do a capital transfer. Once we get the data cleaned up, we want to do away with that, get rid of reserve accounts. We'll put the money in accounts, they spend it, we'll have some oversight. If they want to switch it to a different project, then they come back to you. If and only if they want to do something not consistent with the CIP. So you'll start only seeing transfers that are not consistent, and we can look at them with a more critical eye and really think about what they mean. So these are all super ambitious time deadlines, so don't get too attached to them. But then that should put us in really good shape to have a really rich process for the next round. So I think one governing sort of thing that overarches every recommendation we make this year is we are both optimistic but really uncertain about what future funding levels are going to look like. So this body approved an increase in the GO bond authorization that'll be on the ballot in November to go up to 125, but the Board of Finance put in place a mechanism to determine how much bonds we would budget each year annually. So even if the authorization is up to 125, we won't know until the fall likely how much we are authorized to budget in GO bonds. So what we're showing over the 6 years of the program is what's on this chart, an increase to 125, then to 140 for the next 2-year authorization, and then to 170. That will all be contingent on the city's ability to afford the debt service. And that's a decision that will be made annually by Board of Finance. So what we're presenting is the best case scenario.
And do we know the timeline on the 10-year plan? I don't know it either, but this is based on Department of Finance's upcoming 10-year financial plan.
But the
They're
year
in
that
the process of now.
But the year that we're dealing with all 6 years, of course. But the primary year is 2025.
Right. And so we do
You're saying we
know.
have $80 million.
Yes, we do know that. That is real. It's the outer years that are not real.
It's a known fact, as Rumsfeld would say.
Right.
Wow. Quoting Donald Rumsfeld.
And then how that GO bond allocation is broken down in the future years. Fiscal 25 is set in stone. Fiscals 26 and 27 will be voted on. Those have been approved and can't be changed. 28, 29, and 30, we have made a recommendation of how we would focus those GO bonds that focuses as much as we can on infrastructure. It increases the amount for affordable housing slightly for schools, about 5 million for each authorization. And then community and economic development gets reduced significantly with the understanding that the Vacants Initiative will start to take on some of the funding of the programs that are currently funded through GO
Gotta
bonds.
make sure that happens.
And the school increase,
Where's Recs and Parks in that?
Infrastructure.
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 so and the schools increase, is that because of Kerwin? Or is,
No, that's because we need to invest more in our schools.
okay, where does Kerwin come in?
Kerwin is an operating budget requirement.
Operating side issue, thank
So
you.
it's about $100 million over the last 2 years of extra operating money.
It's already been set aside over the last 2 years for Kerwin.
Yep.
Explain again the community economic development. Where are we finding happy money?
So, Chris, do you want to talk about the Vacants Initiative?
This is, the big umbrella is the Vacants Initiative, which has, I'd say, 5 steps to it.
The mayor's.
That would bring in new money based on a return from developing vacant houses. So it's a new approach for the city. It's very significant.
Highway user revenue is another really uncertain future revenue stream for the city. You all are likely aware that the mayor or the governor's proposed budget significantly reduced highway user revenue. After 2 years ago, the General Assembly passed a significant increase.
It's lasted for a year.
It lasted for a year. So the governor
Still have it.
came back and proposed a one-year kind of Band-Aid patch. So we're confident in the 2025 number of 69. Nobody knows what's going to happen next year in the future. We have chosen to show in this 6-year program an amount that would be consistent with HB 1187, which is what the General Assembly passed in 2022. So assuming that the General Assembly finds a way to keep that in effect, or the governor comes back and restores to those levels, that legislation would have did require us to come back to renegotiate that. It sunset after, I think, fiscal 27. And so it was always something we were going to have to go back and fight for. So that's why you see the drop off in 28, 29, and 30.
So the governor's lowering was his expectation that the HUR money is going to drop or has been dropping?
Has
Or
been
are we
dropping.
siphoning off?
Siphon.
Both.
It-
Yeah.
Yeah, yes.
What are we siphoning it to?
General funds of the state. It's the same thing that happened, regrettably, during the O'Malley administration.
Big time, right. That's where we lost a lot of money.
You know, that's how they balanced the budget. Was they took it out of highway user revenue and put it in the state's general. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but
That's what happens in a recession, right?
Yep. So we're sure of 69 million for 2025. We're anticipating that 26 and 27, ideally, we'll find a way to keep 94 in there in accordance with the House bill that was passed to reinstitute. But that House bill had a sunset in 2027, and so in 2028, we expect it to fall back down again.
And there's a state commission looking at the highway user revenue side of things to figure out how to increase the revenue. That's going into its 2nd year now. John Laria is the only person I know on that.
And these monies can only be spent on DOT projects?
They can only be spent on transportation-related purposes. So you can see a lot of it. The blue is what goes to DOT's operating budget, and then the orange is what's sort of left over for capital. The statute that allows us to use, or that gives us the HUR, allows Baltimore City to use it for a pretty expansive list of uses, like street sweeping and things like that.
Okay.
So tree planting.
What's that?
dredging. Oh, I don't know. I'd have to look. No, probably not. I think it does have to be an activity in the right of way. I don't know if, I don't know if water is the right of way. It's interesting. It's, Eric Tiso says it's not, so it's- no. Yeah. Okay. And so that's kind of the background of all the recommendations that we're making, is that uncertainty, but optimism. I mean, this is a lot of new money for the CIP, and it's heading in a really good direction if it holds. So now I want to just get into about 10 specific places where we made significant recommendations that differ from what the agencies requested. And the first one is the East Side Transfer Station construction. So the agency had not prioritized that project in the first few years of the program. We would recommend funding that as soon as possible, understanding it to be a priority of this administration, and because we have a $4 million EPA grant for a composting facility that relies on the transfer station being built. It is a lot of money to keep $4 million, so I want to make sure that I mention that this transfer station and the composting facility and the services provided there would also kind of set us up for future waste reduction initiatives. So this might be key to like a construction, demolition, recycling, debris recycling. It can help facilitate all the activities of the Bureau of Solid Waste.
Commissioner Collins here. Would it be reasonable to ask Solid Waste to estimate the savings on the operating budget that this would hopefully deliver? Is
Well,
that doable?
The savings that you would realize initially would be the fact that our own curbside collection people
Trucks
could
wouldn't have to
bring
go to
their waste that are on the east side of town. Right now, either have to go to the Northwest Transfer Station or go line up. And that takes them out and extends their hours. So we could see a drop, one would hope, in our overtime.
Wear and tear on vehicles.
Right, and a more efficient delivery to citizens. We could see, we're also having
Can you turn your mic on?
updated drop-off centers, so you don't have to lift your couch.
Commissioner Collins, can you turn your mic on?
Oh, I forgot we were actually in a meeting. You know, so there are, that encourages people on the east side of town to bring their materials to this location. It is, we hope to see a drop in some illegal dumping because we would also have a location for small haulers. So now they'd have 3 choices. We would hope to see eventually, when the whole program is developed, to see more recycling, more waste diversion, and of course, the composting. So it'll be spread out throughout the operation, I would believe. It just makes a lot of sense.
I think it'd be difficult to estimate that.
Well, it'll be difficult for me. I could try to get an estimation.
So the fiscal 25, what did they ask for in 25 for this?
Let's see. Pull that up real quick.
I'm just trying to figure out, we're funding this for 26 through 30, or are we giving them more in 25 and then a hell of a lot more in 26 through 30?
A small amount in 25 and then quite a bit in focus in 26 and 27. And I'll actually get back to that when we talk about future years. So I'm going to put a pin in that and move on.
Okay.
The next item, when we started planning, finance gave us a projection of 58 million in highway user revenue. Those came in slightly higher as of their last projection at 69.3 million. So we'd recommend putting like all 10 million of that extra toward the Hanover Street Bridge. There's currently an application underway for a grant to do NEPA and to get us to 30% design. So this would either match that grant, hopefully make us more competitive for the grant, and then provide a backstop if we don't get the grant. The project itself is going to be at least 100, we think at least $100 million. So even if we do get a grant to cover a significant portion of the NEPA, this can be a down payment for the future construction costs. We know the city will be on the hook for at least some match for that.
So the South Baltimore Gateway Partnership has plans for this bridge as well as part of their the master plan for the Middle Branch, and they have cash.
Not that much, not $100 million.
I know that. I'm not asking for $100 million. I'm asking for like $4 or $5 million.
Or just dedicate some slot machines.
Well, that's where they're going to get their cash from. So, is any of that included in this? Or this is, I mean,
This is highway user, this 10 million is highway user revenue. No, we can talk a little more internally about how that might fit in. Most of the funds we're getting through that stream are going to like park projects and other community projects in that area.
I think maybe ideally what you do is you look at South Baltimore Gateway Partnership and you say, here's what you want to do in addition to the bridge from what we need to do from a transportation standpoint. You need to pay for that.
Yeah,
And I do believe, doesn't the extent go to the boundary, the city border now?
I believe on the RAISE grant it does. So if we did get that grant, it would likely be the whole corridor. If we don't get the RAISE grant, we'd probably have to focus it more. The design process is going to take at least 6 or 7 years, so you're not going to see any funding for construction in the 6-year CIP. First, they have to do, all the environmental and permits and all
$10 million is for the NEPA study and
to 30%.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
You better get a big
portion-
caulk gun, because we're not gonna, looking at that picture, I don't think we're gonna make it in 10 years.
I wouldn't walk underneath that.
What, have we seen any movement in DOT towards infrastructure grants through all the infrastructure bills for bridges? Bridges are so damn expensive.
That's one of the they're applying for a RAISE grant, which is part of
For this bridge?
For this bridge. Mhm.
Oh, yeah, that's the plan.
Would all the interest in the community activity in that area help bolster that request? I mean, the fact that,
I think it depends on who's president, really, to be honest.
oh gee, this has been such a depressing afternoon. Okay, thank you.
The next one, you'll see there was a request for the Waxter Center HVAC replacement. We funded at $500,000 last year, estimated to be about, I think, around $4 million. After kind of some preliminary assessment, realizing they'd have to touch the roof or the ceilings and the lighting and the electrical to do the HVAC. Their new estimate is $8 million. And so we've renewed a recommendation to pursue a P3 for the Waxter Center to potentially offer that site for redevelopment with a contingency that a senior center be included in any new development that we could then lease.
Woo-hoo. So we can go ahead with this, I think, work with the
So we're not recommending
Department of
CAD.
Aging to figure out the,
There have been proposals for just this.
what's that?
There have been proposals for just what you're describing in the past.
Oh, no, for years.
So,
According
On
to
this
the
building?
Deputy Mayor, like 10
literally.
years.
That's
That-
Chris, I think he did one. I think,
not this Chris.
no,
Different
you're
Chris.
Chris.
Yeah.
Right, so we
I didn't know
won't
that.
recommend CIP funding for that, but we'll continue to pursue that outside of the CIP. The Southern District, the agency came in requesting $6 million in fiscal '25 for interior improvements to the Southern District Police Station. We had originally approved $1 million in fiscal '21 for this station for roof and some limited, or not for roof, but some limited interior upgrades, restrooms and locker rooms. The scope of that expanded quite a bit to include a new gym and some other renovations, which is why the $6 million request this year. So we'd recommend that they cut that way back and stick closer to the original scope.
So your kids say, Dad, why don't you defund the police? You can say, well.
Another factor is this is about a quarter mile from the new.
Rumsfeld, defund police. Man, you're hitting them all, man.
I was going to insert a Second Amendment statement here.
This is about a quarter mile from the new Middle Branch Rec Center as well. So we think that it might be a good symbolism to
Is
work out at that
building
wonderful rec center.
Really worthy of the investment?
It's, believe it or not, it's the second newest police station.
Okay.
Could mean anything.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Well, we're gonna get to police stations here, aren't we, in this presentation? Yeah. Not quite, not this police
There
station.
there was some funding requested in fiscal '25 for the downtown campus along Fayette Street from Holiday to President Street. So that's the police headquarters and the district court and the police annex and this building and our neighbors next door. So I think the request was for design for HVAC improvements to the Benton. DGS and MOID have engaged a financial consultant to look at this area from a financial perspective to determine, to kind of do a cost benefit analysis of leasing space and selling the buildings or, demolish, or a whole host of different possibilities for the services located here. So we'd recommend deferring any investment in these buildings for a year until we have a little more information about that.
The district court is moving up to Calvert.
Yes.
Right? That's the district court. But they're still gonna use that building. I mean, the Calvert Street facility is not gonna be open for a while.
A year. I don't
You were-
think they'll
you were
use it
looking-
after this.
It's not the circuit court,
No, it's
Yeah,
district.
it's district court that's moving.
That's one of the things I learned a lot in the charrette downtown, was that it's this district court that's moving up.
Yeah. So I will say the CAO is very nervous about this, and we've promised her sort of a municipal center plan over the next year, because she doesn't like the ambiguity of this, so.
The CAO?
If we abandon this strip, she wants to know what could happen there.
That's a real estate exercise.
Abandon the strip, I mean, everything there?
I think it's
Yeah, why not?
possible.
Why not?
Cummings, we've invested money in Cummings. This building is failing all over the place. And the garage in the police department collapsed.
We just put a tunnel in there. We're a year away from 100 years old.
Obviously, a conversation letter, but I've had at least 2-3 developers come and ask about P3 plans or some sort of
Oh.
plan with the city for the last 8 years.
I would
on this.
love to talk to them.
Yeah, so.
I would love
Dig
to
them
do
up, but we
Yeah.
have them.
Yeah, that'd be great. That would help a lot.
I think DGS is, I think this is a great idea. Don't give them any money until they figure out what the hell they're gonna do. Why pump money into a building that you may get rid of in 2 years?
Because we all complain, we who are in the
And that's fair. I
complaint.
We have recommended, one of the reasons we've recommended that Abel Woolman is not one we're likely to sell. And so by reducing the inventory of buildings like this, we'd be able to invest more in Abel Woolman in theory. That's
EGS
that's
has
part
a
of the idea.
strong Historic preservation ethos there. I think Woolman would be prioritized.
Your elevators are
I mean, I love the
scarier than
old
ours.
building. It's
Needs complete. It could still be a P3 or something like that. Who knows what happens with water and wastewater?
Ooh, did this come down or go up?
The Park Heights Library, they've requested, I think they requested $3 million in FY '25 out of GEO bonds. They've also received about a $6 million private commitment from philanthropy. So they've estimated the total cost of the facility at around $18.5 million. And what we're proposing funding with GEO bonds, 1.5, would get us to that target,
Great.
slightly past. So this would fully fund Park Heights Library, and that can move forward.
Does that private philanthropy have about $100 million extra?
We can ask.
I'm just asking.
One other, a smaller difference, Rec and Parks requested around, I think, 250 for a master plan for Clifton Park. Per the land disposition agreement with Morgan State, they're required to produce a master plan for the park. They are currently doing a master plan for the entire campus that'll probably take another year. And so their plans for the park will sort of depend on what that total master plan says. But we don't want to duplicate efforts with them, and we want to let them do the thing that they're required to do. So we've recommended not funding that and putting some funding in future years for the actual improvements.
And ideally, Morgan can help with the improvements to the
Yep.
park.
Mm-hmm.
Since they
Yeah,
got the
could be
land for
traffic
nothing.
pattern changes, yeah, for sure.
Right, one other difference, DPW put some funding in the future years of their request towards construction of a rail transfer station. We think that that's a more immediate need to study and get some good numbers around cost, about, cost benefit of doing that versus long haul trucking versus potentially some other waste diversion. So we put 500,000 in that they did not request for them to do a study and to get some financial details on a future rail transfer facility.
And now, Doug, you know exactly how planning interacts with the agencies.
So have we talked to the agencies on all these yet? Like Hanover Street and, no?
Some, not formally.
Got a spy here.
Tax application.
She's a double agent.
One item you'll see that wasn't requested is funding for the tax application modernization project in BSIT. This has been a Department of Finance priority, and so we were able to look at old Department of Finance capital projects and identify unspent funding and put about 4.1 million of that into this project for BSIT, in addition to some new PAYGO funding. And then Department of Finance identified $4 million from some fund source that they were contributing, that we're budgeting here in the capital budget.
This has been their top priority.
Well, so they can collect taxes and get money into the city. Now, if we could only do the same thing with water meters, I'm sorry.
And so I'll note there's an ARPA allocation. The 4 million and other is ARPA in this project as well. Middle Branch Resiliency Initiative, they had put in about 35 million, I believe, in their request, and it went through DPW, but they're working closely with our Office of Sustainability, and that was a placeholder. They received notice that they were awarded 10.8 million, so that's why you'll see that change from what the agency requested.
They were awarded 10.8 million from whom?
FEMA or no, I'm unclear which
And
federal.
which agency
I think it's
received that?
FEMA.
We've put it in DPW's budget. Well, the idea is that planning will work closely, but planning is not set up to administer that type of
No.
funding.
Stormwater provided the local match.
Right. Makes sense for it to be in DPW then.
We're fundraising for the entire city. Every time we spent 3 years on the stormwater enterprise fund and immediately began siphoning money.
Don't tell me that.
To the surrounding communities, does an initiative like this reach? Or is it strictly, think of Middle Branch is almost entirely written by Parkland.
Yeah.
We're talking about resiliency, I presume that has to do with trees and stormwater and sea level rise, all that good stuff.
Right.
But I think it's probably not limited to just that 100 foot around the body of water, but could easily stretch up into Cherry Hill.
Well, this particular project targeted 2 private sites, Harbor Hospital and the BGE Spring Garden site. That was the initial, so that will create wetlands and buffers between the water and those 2 sites.
Okay.
And
But
then
they-
we have another
I thought you
application.
were suggesting it'd be a toll road or something.
But
There has been a lot of discussion about toll roads.
Good.
But they also received $30 million from FEMA, right?
Yes, well, yeah, I think it's FEMA. So,
Middle Branch?
I'm unclear on all this, but the overall grant was like 42 million originally. And I don't know if this is a second application or part of that application.
All right, so let's get you all some follow-up on this one. It's all state grant, so it's not general fund money that's competing with other priorities, but we can follow up and give you more information.
Yeah, because it was 2 years ago now, or a year and a half ago, that they received a major federal FEMA grant on their resiliency planning for the Middle Branch, and that was supposed to fund, I thought, who was the woman who was of counsel for DPW? She went over to Greenvest? What's her name?
Oh, she used to work.
Yes, she used to work for you. She went over to Greenvest. They're the ones who are, Dana, thank you, Dana. Because, yeah, it was Dana though. Because they were planning all the wetland constructions and everything around MedStar and at the mouth of the Middle Branches, at the mouth of, what is it? That's Gwens Falls. The mouth of Gwens Falls as it comes into the Middle Branch.
Right.
So this is nature.
We've been shortlisted on a second one, so.
This is nature-based resiliency infrastructure through stage 1 of the initiative, already funded at $53 million for the following sites: Spring Gardens, MedStar Harbor Hospital, Hanover Street Wetlands, and Patapsco Delta Project.
So this is in addition to the funds that they've already received.
Yes.
So they got a $10 million overrun, and they haven't even started. No, I'm just kidding.
FEMA's been good to us.
Yeah, no, FEMA's been great.
By the way, they're here all next week. Be nice to them if you see them.
Do they have tattoos saying I'm from FEMA?
They're gonna
Hey, are
be
you from
camped
FEMA?
out.
It's supposed to be nice to you.
Ronald Reagan's famous quote.
Right.
We're here from the government. 9 scariest words.
FEMA's been very nice.
The-
They really have.
The estimated total cost of the project is $96 million.
Whew.
Yeah. And that has nothing to do with the actual parkland improvements. That's strictly the resiliency stuff, right?
Okay, so we talked about the increase in GO bonds that we're anticipating or hoping for. We have proposed that we create a policy where we set aside 20% of the infrastructure-related bonds for special projects. And this is to limit the amount of new kind of big idea stuff that gets funded through this mechanism and make sure that we're preserving as much as we can for state of good repair on our existing infrastructure. And so 20% amounts to these totals that you see here of the infrastructure-related bonds. And we've proposed putting that into 4 major projects. The first being the Eastside Transfer Station, which we already talked about. So that's recommended at 12.5 in 26 and 4 and 27. Surplus schools demolition, we recommend putting an increment toward that in 27 and 29. In 28 and 29, we've recommended focusing the funding on a new police station. Department of General Services is working to look at replacements for 2 police stations, and we believe with this increase, we could afford to fully fund one. They're quite pricey. And then making sure we preserve some for a major investment in Druid Hill Park.
Now, that's not to stop the agencies from asking for monies for these specific things as part of their capital. So if I'm BCRP and I come in next year and I say, all right, we have this master plan for Druid Hill Park and we want to start putting money away for that. They actually did ask for some money for Druid Hill Park this year. Are we saying, no, don't do that because we got $22.6 million for you in 30, or is it we believe that by 30 the $22.6 million is going to give them enough to pull the trigger?
I think some of those details are still to be worked out. So the cost estimate on Druid Hill Park, I think, is
70, 80 million.
About $100 million.
about $100 million.
But they are seeking state funds. They already got some state funds. The request for this year was state funds, which remains to be seen, but is not yet in the state budget as far as I'm aware. But they have other years that they are targeting for state funds before FY30. So that $100 million has phases to it, and so they can do kind of complete phases, as they are able to find money. But as Kristen mentioned, I think the details of that are yet to be worked out, but we want to make sure that we are focusing funding on state of good repair. And that does mean not doing these projects kind of out of funds that we want to have reserved for state of good repair. So we want to like really establish some discipline around that so that we don't due to the future, our future selves, what has been done, for our current selves in terms of the infrastructure.
Cool.
This kind of,
Point out there's a raise grant going in on the street part of this project, the Druid Hill, this year also,
okay.
for DOT.
And this, I think, at least gives us a sense of what we could afford in the future to kind of plan around other funding sources and determine whether we want to pursue, the current plans.
Does the surplus schools demolition eventually lead to transfer of title and regeneration?
You mean
Ideally.
we're investing money to open up sites. I would like to think that there's a benefit to us beyond just taking down an abandoned building.
Yeah, I think the estimate for demolition would probably be much higher than this, but I don't know. We wouldn't necessarily, we couldn't see the money go back into the capital budget probably. That's kind of a big pool of finance department nothingness, but.
Where I was going with each of the special projects up here represents an initiative that makes our city work better. But demolition by itself needs the second step of regeneration, I think, in order to turn those things into something as useful as the other's suggestion. It just seems odd to me that, we know we're gonna have to spend this money. It's good to start identifying it in our budgets, but it seems like the end of the story isn't just taking down the schools.
No, they would be offered for redevelopment.
Yeah, they would be.
Yeah,
So
that's
right now,
okay.
the buildings are a liability.
Right.
And they're a liability for the city. So they are being transferred to the city. And so they're a liability. DGS is, responsible for taking care of them. They're being vandalized to the point where you can no longer use the building. So this would basically set the stage for offering sites for redevelopment.
Perfect, that was
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, okay.
I guess my only thought with that would be, is that if we know it's a surplus school and we have, it's on the books, I would much rather get rid of it as quickly as possible, not have to spend the $8.5 million in demo. And even if that meant giving the site to a developer so that they would have the liability to take care of that.
Yeah,
we
sure.
can wash our hands of it and we could say.
We've been trying.
I'm sorry?
We've been trying.
Yeah.
So they're liabilities to the point where some of them you can't give away. Like you need to create kind of a development site by taking down the existing building.
So
But we are selling, some are being reused by city buildings.
Yeah, DHCD does have a very creaky disposition process, takes at least a year, but they've put out, I believe, 6 in the last 2 years. Our feeling
How many
is
have been
that,
settled now?
none, right, exactly. That's what I mean by creaky. I don't think any have been settled on, maybe I'm wrong, but
Only a fraction of them have even.
yours hasn't been, right?
Hasn't been settled, and that's one that's been sort of.
Kicking around longest,
awarded, but
right.
Still just not inked.
Right, right.
Some of them don't even have places to settle.
Well, most of them don't, that's the issue, and just projecting ahead, the buildings aren't reusable anymore, they're
Right.
cold
Yeah.
shells, and the land is more valuable than the building.
Yeah, no, you guys, I think you gotta unload them,
Yeah.
one way or another, and get those sites to be productive.
And I've learned that you can bake into the demolition, you can bake in the recapture of recyclable materials.
As an offset.
Yeah.
Although the demo guys like to hold on to all that stuff too. Yeah.
So I've come to the conclusions. Just wanted to give you a summary of the recommendations by agency. This one shows you agency with local and other total sources. stop me if there's anything you want to explore further, but I won't read the numbers to you.
The asterisks.
Schools, sorry, I didn't put my footnotes on there. The school system gets the majority of its capital money from the state. So this only represents the portion that flows through the city.
And we're at 167,650,000,
Yes.
and we were comfortable with 167 million. Why did I think we were in like the $103 million range?
We have
Oh,
been.
Then you got the highway user revenue.
Yep.
The additional, okay,
Mhm.
cool.
We can look at, and I'll put these on your Wix site. I don't believe the slides are on your Wix site yet, but I can put them on there if you want to go back and look into this in more detail, but,
This is a lot better than what was on the Wix page.
okay.
Yeah.
It was a lot. Recommendations by fund source, so we've broken out by the kind of more local discretionary,
Eli's been overhauling this a lot.
highway user revenue, state and federal, and utility.
Pretty soon we're gonna be able
We didn't make any recommendations really for the utilities. We funded those as requested. We will likely see changes in both the Pimlico and the casino impact aid as those spending plans are finalized in the coming weeks. And we'll likely see some changes to state grants once the General Assembly finishes its session. This is just a breakdown of fiscal '25 by fund source with those more local discretionary fund sources in purple, the federal and state in blue, and the utility in green. And then just this morning, hot off the presses, Jamie was able to produce these maps showing the per capita allocations. And then our initial draft distribution analysis, so where we look at the distribution by neighborhood, so by quartiles according to race and income. So we separated by DPW, no DPW. I'm realizing this is the first time some of you have seen this. We look at DPW separately from all the other projects. And of the projects we're able to map, we map them onto a community statistical area. And then we break those community statistical areas into quartiles. So the top kind of segment of the bar represents the quarter of neighborhoods with the highest percent of Black or African American residents.
Right.
And then the gray is the quarter of neighborhoods with the lowest percent of Black or African American residents. We do that for income too. So the gray is the 13 or so neighborhoods with the highest median household income, and then that dark at the bottom is the 13 or so neighborhoods with the lowest household income, medium household income.
It's very interesting charts.
And so we do that for DPW as well. And again, haven't had a ton of time to dig into this to see what's driving any of the trends that we may see here, but it's something we keep our eye on annually. It's just the quartiles, so they look at the median household income of each of the 56 neighborhoods and then break them into the four with, the four quartiles.
Man, everybody should have more money than
Has
this.
this become an illustration related to an equity analysis?
Yeah, that's how it started. We're calling it a distribution analysis now because it's not really telling us about equity. We're required to do an equity analysis by a 2018 ordinance, and so this is what has served as that for the last however many years. We started this before the ordinance, but
Could you provide sort of just a small written summary of what the data is telling us?
yes.
Or how we are being actionable by looking at this data? Like what?
Yeah.
Looking at it, what does this mean?
So to me, what it says, and I'm happy to provide a write-up, but to me, I think, let's see, I think, let's take this one. So the bottom two segments of the chart are like the half of the neighborhoods in the city with the lowest median household incomes. And if the funds were distributed perfectly equally across the city, each of these segments would be about the size of the gray bars.
Right.
So they would be approximately equal. So in 25, the half of neighborhoods with the lowest median household incomes are getting slightly more
Something like
than the high income neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And then on the race chart, so the 13 or so neighborhoods, or the quarter of neighborhoods with the highest percent of Black or African American residents are getting slightly more than would be expected if all things were equal. But then that kind of second tier is not getting much.
Yeah, the pink is odd on that one.
It's high, and that's probably driven by one big investment in one neighborhood that falls into that quartile. But that's where we need to dig in a little bit and see what's driving some of those trends.
That's really interesting.
It kind of,
Just chew on that for a
yeah,
while.
it kind of just gives us enough to know that we need to dig in a little further at times.
Would you mind if I just like add one note around the limits of
Yes.
this kind of analysis? I mean, one thing to take into account is that this analysis is based on the point locations of projects, generally speaking, not on a catchment area. So for instance, a rec center that's located right at the line of a community statistical area would be assigned to the area where is it a buffer now?
There's a
Yes,
buffer,
that's
yeah,
correct.
it's-
And I apologize.
There's a buffer,
I
but
went
it's-
back and forth with
Yeah.
Jamie about the methodology, so
Right, but a library may serve, people from a mile away or a quarter mile away, whereas a different library might serve people from 2 miles away, but we're applying the same radius to all of them. So we're
But
not
you're applying
necessarily
radius.
looking at who's served.
I mean, I think that's a big step, actually. It's sort of a weighting factor.
Yeah.
Huh.
And DPW's gone a step further, and they engaged AECOM, who was looking at like who is served by that sewer line, and they're able to attribute it. So that's exciting.
I just want to.
There is a buffer.
That's a lot of mic. So we charge that thing? I just want to point out the discrepancy here. Like, this is a really cool, staying with this one, I mean, this is a great graph, and, you don't see the classic butterfly pattern, that's great, but from $13 to $65 per capita in the light green to $1,300 per capita, that seems extreme.
What is going on down in Brooklyn, Curtis Bay? That is an industrial area.
So the
My
Hanover
guess
Street
is
Bridge.
the treatment plant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this doesn't
This is
include
not-
DPW.
This is likely major transportation investment, so there's likely Hanover Street Bridge is probably represented on that, and that would get a
Maybe
bigger
Cherry
buffer
Hill.
because that's a pretty significant.
From South Baltimore to Cherry Hill, but Brooklyn, Curtis Bay, that's where Amports is, and that's where all what am I missing?
The treatment
I think
plant.
there's a big. Let me.
But she's saying that this is non-DPW.
Yeah.
This does not this does not include DPW, so it's what the hell is going, I think, in looking at this,
There's a big
this is
streetscape down
cool.
that area.
I'm really liking that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's nice, this is nice right here.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking on the downtown portion, of course. I just want to mention that downtown, because of the location of all city buildings, all the CIP funding is for the city hall. It's not capital improvement, so it's the city buildings that aren't the roads and stuff. So while it's dark green, it's taking care of the city-owned buildings in downtown, not the public space.
My concern about this map is that, it's easy for a large infrastructure project to skew how you interpret this completely. I mean, it's great that we're redoing Hanover Street Bridge, and that's gonna be wonderful for Cherry Hill. But in fact, that's only one aspect of those communities' needs. And so we put $100 million into a bridge and it looks really awesome, but there's so much more that hasn't been addressed. So I think this should be used with caution, this map.
Yeah, I think how we've been using it is it allows us to ask questions.
Yeah.
You're right. The one thing can skew, so we've looked at doing rolling averages and a whole lot of different things. But
Yeah.
you're right. It's a signal for us to dig in deeper and understand what's going on if things start to look skewed.
If we had $1 billion, it would be a different story.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe not, but literally $100 million project doesn't throw it that far out of whack, right?
Yeah, I think it actually might. I think $100 million project down in Cherry Hill doesn't really
All right, so if
portray
I go,
Well,
the needs, how we're addressing the needs of Cherry Hill.
there are cascading effects of large projects in neighborhoods. I mean, workers patronize local shops, you get local, sometimes you get your procurements in that area. I mean, there are cascading effects, but I think we're just really feeling around to how we can put a picture out there of where we're spending. It's a challenge. It's absolutely a challenge.
And we definitely know there's some work to be done. We have a new equity and engagement planner on board now who's started to look at this and ask some of the same questions. And I think we'll be able to, with our better access to data and amazing data skills and new equity planner, I feel like the time might be ripe to take to iterate a little on this one.
good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you would like, we can go through the line item details, or we can go through just what's been changed. Or I could just orient you to these. These are both on your Wix site.
Can you just help us understand how to read this?
Yes. Okay, so this
All
first.
66 pages? No,
Okay,
there's
her.
only 4. Well, the one on the Wix page was 60-something pages.
So this is the changes. The smaller one is just what has changed from what the agencies requested. So you could scroll through the agency request report on the website, which is very readable, understand what's been requested, and then come here to see what's changed. So anything on this sheet is a change from what agencies have requested. So,
If it's in bold, it's more.
sorry, if it's in bold, it's the sum for that project, and then it's broken out into the fund sources below. So for the tax application modernization, we added 3 million in other funds and 4.1 million in general fund revenue. Pay-go.
And you took that money from 26?
They didn't need, because we were able to fund so
Then you
much in
don't need it in
25,
26.
they didn't need it, so we reduced it in 26.
I may be the only person to look at this chart and go, oh, that's interesting. But based on this alone, I don't have any basis to say yes or no. I don't know how to use this to endorse. It's just a bunch of numbers.
So let me give you, I think we're off the internet. So one way you could use this is to take that report that's on our website that does give descriptions and detail on every single project.
This one?
It's open there. I think I had it.
Is it that one?
That one, that's the one. It's long too. There are a ton of projects.
Oh, maybe not. Just kidding. Thought I had it.
And then you can look at
Toner
this
you
changes
go through.
doc. It says requests versus recommendations. And you can, just everything that's on here is something that has had a change.
Right, yes.
So you can see under the Finance Capital Project Fund, they didn't request anything, but we've taken money out of some of these projects. So that represents a decrease. Let's see, Coldstream, Homestead, and Montebello, acquisition and demolition. We reduced by $1 million in each of these outer years. And that's because we reduced the community and economic development bond in those outer years, assuming that activity would be taken up by the Vacants Initiative funding
But you gave them $500,000.
as requests. No, sorry. So,
changed.
yep, so this would just represent, they asked for 500,000 in general fund. Or sorry, they asked for 500,000 in community and economic development bonds, and we gave it to them in a different fund source. So it nets out to zero, which is why you don't see a change right here.
Gotcha.
Well, we'll get better at these reports for next year, I promise. Let me find another one to walk through as an example.
Yes, I don't feel like I have any reason. I believe that the department has vetted these numbers thoroughly. I have to believe that.
Yep.
But like, am I supposed to say, oh, well, I don't think we should put $6 million in the systemic improvements. Well, I think it should be $5 million. I don't have any basis to make that judgment. Does anybody else here?
No, but that hasn't stopped us. I mean, where there was discretionary money in years past, what would happen was what we would do is we would say, okay, we don't have enough money for half, a tenth of what we need. Okay, here are the critical things, and then here's this extra pot that may or may not be here. So you guys all tee up your extra projects that you would want, and we would go through and kind of make a decision on, oh well, let's pick that one because of X, Y, and Z, because of the presentation, probably whatever it was, and so we would help kind of steer that a little bit that way. But at the end of the day, the reality is we just don't have enough money for everything we need. So it's literally like, okay, you guys deal with this every single day. We're looking to you to say, okay, we think that, you've made some great recommendations. Presented 10 of them that were cool. I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But that's 10 of 200 that could be out there, right?
On the other, the 10 are the major changes for 25. There are some other changes detailed in the sheet that you can dig into. So let's just take this, for example, Clarence Mitchell Courthouse HVAC. There's an additional 17 million in 28 and 16 million in 29. So that's not something the agency requested. Most of what you're seeing in the outer years is money we were able to add to projects because of the increase in GO bonds. So that's what we've recommended adding. So you could look at that and say, we added a whole lot to the general services capital fund, and we didn't add a whole lot to, the Rec and Parks capital fund, and maybe you dig in and ask some questions. We believe that that's the responsible thing to do. I wouldn't, don't want to plant that seed, but that might be the type of thing that you're looking at. Or if there's a specific project that you know about that's critical to an economic development initiative that you didn't hear us or the agencies talk about when they presented, that may be something you want to bring up to the group.
But actually, now that you pointed out the Clarence Mitchell HVAC, what's the long-term goal of Clarence Mitchell? We're talking about putting $33 million into it in 2 years for HVAC, but I've heard people say, they're scrapping the thing to they're completely renovating the thing.
It'll be 3 years, and I do think that'll become a more pressing question. Currently, the belief is that they are historic. We believe that if we are to divest of them, there is likely some subsidy needed. If we are not going to divest of both of them, there is definitely investment needed.
Totally.
It's a placeholder, but your point is well taken. We could and we do talk a lot about that.
Since the last year, the city has told the courts that we were not receptive to a P3 project for the courthouse. Because we can't afford it.
And that the plan that we referenced earlier for Municipal Center includes the courthouses. So Kristen highlighted along Fayette Street, but the courthouses would be part of that conversation as well. And so no matter what happens, whether they remain where they are or whether they relocate, there's going to need to be an investment. So we're just basically
and I agree with
penciling that in.
And I understand that, but I'm wondering why it's not, why it couldn't be a P3. Is the court paying rent?
They're not now, no.
And they don't pay any rent to DGS?
It's a cut rate kind of thing that covers maintenance. All the city buildings aren't paying market rate rent.
Well, I'm thinking to myself, a private investor a private developer would look at $33 million and go, well, that's pretty damn good rent for 5 years or 10 years or whatever it is on a per square foot basis. Yeah, I'll buy that building if you give me the $33 million in rent, and then we're done with our obligation. They own it.
Well, we have a study going for the Sun Paper complex to see if we can afford that.
Please don't buy that.
Huh?
I said, please don't buy that.
Yeah, but I think we decided this year that we couldn't afford both.
Are we really considering buying the Sun Building?
We just got a 5-year extension on our lease so that we have time to figure it out.
Because we really,
As you know, the Fayette Street site is falling apart, so we gotta do something.
But, I mean, again, this is way off base, but to me, I would look at private development companies and say, we're gonna sell you this building, we're gonna sell it to you at a discounted rate, we're gonna lease it, we're gonna lease back for 20 years at this rate. And every 10 years or 5 years or 7 years, whatever the hell it is, you're gonna have to put so much into the building. Private sector community can pencil that out. They can figure out how to make that work. Because they got a grade A tenant, they got a long-term, and they got a reasonable rate. And we've washed our hands of the maintenance responsibility, and we put it back into productive, taxable real estate. There's so many different advantages to just literally sell it all.
We like it because it
The
moves
EYs
it from the capital budget to the operating budget.
Easy.
The study is looking at exactly that, like where does that make sense? Where can we pursue that? So, I mean, that's the path we're going.
So what we need is, we need Burka to hang around for a long time in DGS, because we did this
5 years.
We did this under Steve, right, under Director Sharkey. And then Chi-Chi came in, and we had a really great conversation. We had meetings like, every month.
I know, yeah.
And we were really moving along, and then Chi-Chi leaves, it's gone. Nobody's talking about it anymore. So, all right, enough. Get off my bandwagon.
Well, I think we are moving ahead. It's kind of not just Burka anymore, it's this MOID office. So the CAO has gotten behind the whole P3 discussion.
I mean, ideally, Redwood would act as a good example of how it could be done.
That's out there,
It's
right?
written in Downtown Rise to start the conversation, getting the group that you were talking about together. So that's what DM Williams is working on, to get a group together to start this exact conversation.
I can give you all my notes from the last time.
Which is why I believe CAO Leach is on board with it.
Yeah, and the Redwood is on the RFP now. Right?
Yeah, it's out for RFP. But, I mean, city agencies still use Redwood, and it would be great if you were to see how that deal works out. Out on the street, somebody purchases it, then they require a lease back from the city, and we look at it and say, doesn't make financial sense for us. You're gonna have to do this, or we're not gonna put it out on the street.
So I will say, in this room, we took a step backwards when we went to 3 days a week returning to the office instead of 2 days a week. Because we could have increased the amount of surplus property we put on the market, but
What was that?
that's still
Didn't
to
Ernst
be,
and
I
Young
think,
do
still to be
a
worked out.
workforce, or what? The pilot program, right?
What's
What
that?
happened with that?
The pilot.
The pilot
It-
program for co-housing or co-working space.
Pretty much died, just went away. The EY, yeah, pretty much went away.
All right, I'll get off my bandwagon so you guys can go home.
You're perfectly justified.
Yeah, just want to point out, if you're looking at these spreadsheets and looking at the changes, for example, if you want to learn more about the project, you can grab the project number. This is the unique identifier, and then go to the report on the website. And I think I'll send you all an email and maybe detail some of these with links so that you have easy access. But then you can just search for that that number.
Oh, do send that to us.
Okay. And then that's a way to cross-reference and to look at more detail. I can't. Control F. Control.
I was just gonna share that I learned only this year that I'd always been downloading the PDFs, but the CSV spreadsheets are broken up into tabs and easier to search. So that's my new go-to.
Well, that's for the old
I have no
reports.
idea what you said, but.
Right, well, now that I figured it out, they're gonna change it on me.
All right. So what you don't need anything from us today. This is informational, feedback, input.
Well, so in 2 weeks, you'll have to vote on a set of recommendations to forward to the Board of Estimates. So if there are changes you want to make, you'll have to move to make those changes and then get the vote next time and have the discussion. So if there's any discussion, any back and forth that you wanted to have, ideas, that might need to happen over
Between
even
now and the 7th.
between now and the 7th.
So if you go through this information and something sticks out at you, you need to send an email to to the commission and include Kristen and Sarah. I think you're already on all the emails we send out. No? Okay, well, I will send out an email when I get back to my office, and I will entitle it Baltimore City Planning Commission CIP. And it'll include both Sarah and Kristen. And send the email, get it all teed up. So on the 7th, ideally, we're all walking down the same road, saying, and we're ready to go. We're not going to have debates about, well, can we move $3,000 from this account to that account?
So there's two
And
things before then. Typically, we do during this work session, but if you want to get those to us before March 7th, it's if you have any questions where we need to get more information from an agency to help inform your opinion on a matter, or if you want to propose a change. So we would need both, kind of where you need more information and where you want to propose anything.
Just to make sure there's no additional revenue with this, right? So if we do propose a change, we have to do it two ways. One is I want to add this, but I want to take this out.
Correct. It's currently balanced. The recommendation is
Gotcha.
currently balanced.
And
I don't think it was submitted, but yeah.
all right.
Do you have to formally end the meeting? Eric asked me for a time of the meeting ending.
Yes. Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor, aye. Aye. Nobody's opposed at 5:06.